from CPS Energy on their FY27 budget, and I asked that they come in as the board was just updated. This is the largest CPS budget ever, both in terms of capital as well as in O&M. And so I think it was important that this body get a sense of where that's headed. This budget also assumes a rate increase, and so as presented, it assumes a rate increase. So it's important that we, again, we never want to get caught flat-footed when our constituents ask about these things. So I appreciate the CPS folks coming in and giving just some top levels at this point, so we can, and I see the chair is here as well, so thanks, Chair Romero, for joining. And then the second topic, related as well, will be just an update, actually, from both of our utilities on the state of data centers. We know that, obviously, this is a national topic. This is something that is also driving and shaping the need for additional support from our utilities. And so a common frame of reference on this, kind of where we are and where we're going, especially as we are talking about two major budgets, both for CPS and SAWS, is only prudent. Yeah. So we'll take the first topic, and then we'll do a round of comments and questions, and then we'll take the second topic and do it that way as well. Okay, over to you, Maria.
Thank you, Mayor, and good afternoon, Mayor and Council. As the Mayor mentioned, the first item is a briefing by CPS on their fiscal year 27 proposed budget. Just a little bit of context, CPS Energy fiscal year is from February 1 to January 31st. So the briefing will provide an overview on the development of their budget as well as a summary of their proposed budget. So with that, I'm going to turn it over to CPS Energy to introduce the presentation.
Good tee-up from Mayor Jones in terms of giving this budget briefing. As she mentioned, this is informational, I think really good information for the council. As many of you know, we've had many discussions with the council, our board of trustees, and the community over the last 4 to 5 years. And we've consistently gotten feedback from all audiences that the focus continues to be on reliability, affordability, and to the extent the pursuit of greener or cleaner energy. And with that steady feedback from our customers over the last 5 years, including conversations we've had with the Rate Advisory Council back in 22, it's been really the policy direction and the policy strategy of our board to really make the long-term investments that you've seen us do for the community, not just in the past, but on a going forward basis. So all that said, the investments here that we're going to discuss are really reflecting a few things in our budget, right? The information we'll share here addresses, the continued local growth that we continue to experience, even excluding the large load or data centers, which we'll talk about later. This budget focuses on using our capital effectively to upgrade our equipment in all of our service territory to be as efficient as possible. This budget also achieves to try and keep rates, balanced so that all customers pay their fair share, and we've heard that feedback, and we can talk more about that in the next presentation as well. And it's also worth noting that our teams continue to actively engage in various financing options to help pay for the things and the investments to help mitigate impact on customer bills the best we can. So I share that just as a quick tee-up, and we'll go ahead and move on here with the presentation. So 4 things really are the objective for today. I'll spend time talking about our process here at CPS Energy. We used to develop our process, our budget rather, and then describe the financial circumstances which we use as guardrails to achieve the financial health that we often speak about. I'll also summarize at a very high level, as Mayor Jones indicated, the capital and O&M forecast that we've indicated and shared with our board last week. And then I'll also speak a little bit about some of the efficiencies that we have worked towards at CPS over the last handful of years, which ultimately benefit our customers. And then I'll wrap up with a brief view of how our funding compares with the expenditures that we anticipate making through the year, and then wrap up so we can move on to our next topic. So in terms of, our process, right? As you'd expect, we spend a lot of time on an annual basis conducting a comprehensive budget review. Obviously, as this council knows, we have a long-term focus in terms of our planning assumptions and our planning horizons. A lot of what we do are multi-year investments that require, the consistency in execution and also the consistency of the funding. There are obviously many inputs that you can see on the slide before and assumptions that really drive our planning process. And we're continually revising those and updating those and challenging ourselves, which ultimately manifest into the numbers that you see. And ultimately, we designed that budget that we'll talk about to achieve, what we believe the community's expectations are in terms of the service that we provide. And so I'll take you to the next slide here. One of the ways that we meet the community's financial needs is really by staying financially healthy. And, for those of you that have known me for the years, it's often something I've talked about here at this council and at our board. And really, my main point has always been, at the end of the day, our financial health translates into lower borrowing costs through the strength of our credit rating, and allows us to fund a lot of the needed investments, ultimately leading to lower rates for all of our customers in the community. As part of our process, we set these financial boundaries that you see on the slide here, and these really do function as cost discipline mechanisms as we are internally deliberating our numbers. For the last 5 years, you've heard me talk to this council about 3 financial boundaries that are used to manage our financial health, and that is what is reflected on this slide. You've heard me talk about these numbers. The illustration is a little different to reflect that we're really trying to triangulate and keep everything within these 3 metrics. So I'll point out, these metrics, right, or these boundaries rather, are metrics, right? So they're just another way to measure the relationship of one number to another number. And it's really the relationships that tell that story more than any one individual number. So as you look through and you try to communicate what they all mean, the first one at the very top is our debt to capitalization ratio. That's the jargon word we use, but ultimately this is a measure of it's a view of debt, rather, that looks at the outstanding amount of debt we have relative to our net worth. And the target that we've set is less than 70%, which is consistent with our expectations of the rating agencies for our credit rating. And we expect to use that as our upper bound while we are in this period of high investment. The second one I'll speak to is our ability to recover borrowing costs, and that's really the bottom left. The jargon word you've heard me use before is our adjusted debt service coverage ratio, but really the easiest way to think about this is what is our ability as CPS Energy to recover funding necessary to cover our borrowing costs, right? Sort of like our mortgage payment on the long-term investments. That target is 1.5 times, and that's consistent with what we've spoken about over the last several years. And that very last one in the bottom right-hand corner is really a measure of our access to liquidity. So how much cash or available credit do we have for the just in case? And that target has always been 150 days of cash on hand or greater, or in combination with available credit, 200 days of liquidity on hand. So those are reflected here in a little different visual than we've talked about, but very consistent with how I've spoken about it in the past. Okay, so here we have on this page our capital plan, and I'll say a couple of overarching comments on this first. Ultimately, this is intended, as I said earlier, to achieve the service levels and expectations of our community. We do have close to 28,000 customers that we're expected to connect this year, about 26,000 of them being electric, and another 5,000 customers on the gas side. So we are a growing community, and I think that's a very good positive for everyone here. And one thing I'll mention, just as a reminder for maybe folks who are listening for the first time, CPS Energy is multiple companies all under one ownership. And what we have here is really unique. If you're in other cities like a Dallas or a Houston, CPS Energy would be multiple companies, 3 or 4 different ones. And so here in CPS, we have one owner for a transmission and distribution company on the electric side. Same with gas. We're a transmission and distribution gas company. We're also the power generation company, and we're also your retail electric provider who you call up on the call center and get service. So that model has served us very, very well. I'll note here the big buckets. This will look similar to the format we've used in years past. It's $1.7 billion. Unique to our capital budget, this is the portion that is partially funded by debt and partially funded by cash. So in this instance of this year, we intend to fund close to 80% of this 1.7 through debt and the other 20% with cash. So the real benefit is the amount of cash flow and kind of rate recovery to pay that is not really 1.7 billion. And that's really an example of when we say we're using our balance sheet efficiently to manage customer bills, it's through that financing techniques and managing to those metrics that I spoke about earlier. Obviously, the largest categories probably come as no surprise, 700 million there for our efforts to improve reliability. Interesting note, about 60%, 400 million of that 700 is for transmission work. And as this council knows, the transmission portion of the business that we own here in the city of San Antonio, it's actually regulated at the state level. So I would put this in the category of required work, but different recovery methods, but it's still under the umbrella of what we spend. The other 300 million really focuses on other reliability and resiliency, civic projects, things like that to support our community. And this is what directly translates to outage times and things of that nature for our customers. The next most obvious bucket there is around customer growth, which again we'll hit on that a little bit in the next presentation. About 290 million of that is purely to hook up new customers and get them to be billed and paying customers. So the 28,000 customers on the electric and the 5,000 customers on the gas, that's the work being done to get them connected. And obviously, power generations are that middle category there, obviously significant. Our fleet, since the last time we spoke to our council in any detail, our fleet is about 3,000 megawatts larger. So the investments to keep those plants in good working order is significant, but what you don't see here is the contribution to the revenue side that those assets bring into our community. And then again, technology and security. This council has heard a lot over the last 4 years. Our investment into our back office IT infrastructure, affectionately known as our enterprise resource planning efforts, and the investment we've made on the security side. And then the very last category there, that's the outreach that you see in the community. When you see anyone from Deanna Hardwick's team out in the community, helping folks out, doing fairs, things of that nature, that's in here. And connecting customers for folks who are out doing that too. And there is a component in here as well attributable to some of our locations and closing down some of our sites and centralizing location-wise some of our facilities so that our frontline folks can dispatch in an efficient manner. On this last slide, or this next slide rather, this is the O&M portion of our budget. Again, this is 1.1 billion. And so this is a lot of the activity that you would expect as ongoing maintenance and routine work. I will note that the first category there is our labor. Right? We have close to 3,700 employees out in the community. That relationship, about 45%, is the kind of historical relationship that we've always had relative to our O&M budget. We obviously have a lot more employees than we did 4 years ago, not just through the planned growth, but also through our acquisitions. We took on some other employees through that effort. And then again, power sustainability and resiliency. This is doing the oil changes you need for our power plants. It's obviously more complicated than that, but that's the type of maintenance we do. About half of that spend, or about 150 million of that spend, is for our part ownership in STP. And that's obviously a great generating resource in terms of reliability, and it's also a zero carbon resource. So a great investment, and our customers have benefit from that. And again, there's a lot more other investments, again, on the technology side, on the reliability side as you go down there. A lot of this work you see out in the communities around maintenance on poles, maintenance on streetlights, replacing circuits, tree trimming. A lot of that work is all under this bucket here under the O&M category of reliability. So the more exciting slide I'd like to share is the next one. So all that said, we often get asked, what have you guys been doing to look for efficiencies or cost savings and things of that nature? We wanted to take a few examples and just put them on the screen here so we can show the council and show our community kind of the work that we've been doing. There have been operational items that we've been able to update and get some efficiencies through the internal kind of rigor on the far left-hand side. There have been some in the middle there. There's a lot of work that our IT department has been doing in terms of optimizing our cloud subscriptions and things of that nature. And obviously, the big one that you've heard this council talk about is the strategy we have around wholesale revenue. Wholesale revenue contributed about $300 million net of fuel this past year. Again, another record year, which really helps cover some of the other expenses that we need to spend. And some of the other things that our customers don't have to do anything for, and it doesn't impact service levels, are some of these financing activities on the far right that we're able to do through prepaid transactions. We're just taking advantage of the opportunities in the financial markets to achieve savings through some of these natural gas or renewable energy prepaid purchases for a commodity we were going to buy anyways. All that to say, there's a lot of work that our community or that our teams do to really try and keep our costs down for our customers. Okay, so this will be my last slide before I wrap up. So what does all this mean? As you look at fiscal 27, this slide is really a breakdown of the funds to pay for the things and how we bring in the money to cover those. So I'll start on the far left-hand side for the sake of just stepping down this really quickly. This is our expenditures that we anticipate and forecast for fiscal year 27, so the year that we're in. I'm rounding up to 1.1 billion on O&M. That is the number that I showed you earlier. That is one of the numbers that our Board of Trustees votes on every year, for us to execute on. The line below that's our debt service, and I have the word capital there just to connect the dots back. The 1.7 billion of capital that we talked about, again, that's not the full amount being spent in that actual year. Part of that is debt finance, part of it is cash financed. So this whole 675 million is the principal and interest portion that we are paying for, and I equate it to like a mortgage we put on a house. It's what you pay every year. And then the other ones, the repair and replacement account. This is really the cash balance that we use to help fund a portion of our capital plan. That's about 530. And then you can see below that is our city payment forecast for the year, about 560 million, which is a little bit higher than this year. It was closer to 510 million, I think, for our fiscal year. And the rest of that bucket is the fuel and regulatory cost. That is, they're unavoidable costs. This is what we inject into our system to run the power plants, go through our gas distribution lines, and the regulatory costs associated at the state level. So that takes you through the expenditures. And as you go over to the revenue side, what I'm calling out here was that the revenue that we forecast to project covers about 99% of what we think is going out the door on the expense side. As the mayor alluded to, that is a delta that we have in the planning. So I'll call out a few things as we go down and address that. I think one thing that stands out is that growth number of $200 million, and it's hard to see on the bar, but on the bottom right you can see that. $200 million of our forecasted revenue is coming from kind of three buckets of growth. About almost 20 million from residential growth. Those are the 26,000 customers we talked about, and about a little over 40 million from our commercial and industrial growth. Again, the lion's share of that organic growth is coming from our wholesale book, which is going up another 135 million relative to last year. So our forecast is in the 400 plus million range for wholesale revenue next year, which is a great story. The other point I'd make is, the big story with CPS Energy is that a lot of our revenues over the years are fairly volatile, and a lot of the expectations we have depend on, is it a really hot summer? Is there scarcity in ERCOT that helps our wholesale book? Or is it really mild? So to address the point of having a delta between the revenue and expenditures, what we often say is, hey, we are going to get ourselves through the summer months. That gives us opportunity to materially get through a large portion of the year that drives our year-end forecast. And at that point, I think we can discuss the options in which we can go back, filling up any gaps that exist. But what I've learned in my time here is whatever estimate of a gap we have, it's going to be different by the time we get on the other side of the summer, which is why we like to kind of have those conversations, more detailed conversations, when we have a better idea. So with that, I'll wrap up, Mayor Jones, so that we can move on, but I'll pause for any questions. Thank you.
Thank you, Corey. Thank you, Corey. Thanks for walking us through that. And always my hat's off to the CPS team. They do great work. And thankful that we can all, though, again, as we're looking at not only the financial situation of the community, but also both of our utilities coming with their largest budgets and both coming with potential rate increase requests. Really important that we have this information sooner rather than later, and we have it across the council sooner rather than later. So thank you for that. And, a little bit of good news, if you would, the major acquisition that was made last year, speak a little bit to, how that's performing, how that's already, putting money into the coffers.
Yeah, so I'll speak at a high level, and then anyone else can chime in. But we made the purchase this past fiscal year, and it had not only was the cost to purchase the equivalent megawatts about half as much as it would to be built. The contribution to wholesale revenues was about $10 million more just for the balance of last year than we anticipated, so close to $30 million just from the assets we bought. Going forward, a lot of that incremental $130 million that we spoke about is attributable to those assets, and the totality of the forecast we have for this upcoming year is largely driven by not just the purchase we just did, but also driven by the previous purchase. And all of that, to your point, Mayor Jones, is it helps our customers. To the extent we can get the revenue now from these assets before we grow into it, that is another dollar that we collect from the state of Texas, who needs our product, but it's not something we have to collect locally. So as we get in future conversations, we can talk about that.
Great. Thanks, Corey. As we dig into this, at this point, I know you want to, the intent obviously is to get through the summer, right? Before you come back to the council with what a potential rate increase might be. But when you shared with the CPS board that this assumed a rate increase, did you already have one in mind?
I think I'd phrase it this way. The $50
Okay.
million gap that we have, if nothing changed, right, then, and there was concurrence upon the board, then that would be the placeholder for a rate increase for that amount to achieve that.
Okay, but not a specific percentage at this point?
No, we would actually wait for our cost of service study, which we've talked about, to finish, and then we would be able to allocate that appropriately.
Okay, great. It was helpful for me, and I think maybe a cheat sheet for the rest of the council as well, is to compile the high-level, high-ticket items that are in that $700 million. I think would be really helpful for the council to understand. We are also obviously watching at the federal level as there are changes not only in regulations but also changes in the incentives, and as we understand our focus on how we want CPS to make and meet our energy needs, right, is closely aligned to our objectives as outlined in the Climate Action and Adaptation Plan. Can you speak to how this budget continues to keep us on that path, right, even in light of some of those changes, or maybe some of the tweaks that this budget accounts for in light of the changes at the federal level?
Yeah.
Now, that's you or Elena, whoever wants to answer that.
Maybe tag team. I'll be very quick and just say that it absolutely aligns with the generation plan that our board approved previously, which was in line with the cap. So the acquisitions we did, those natural gas, were part of the original profile. What we don't talk about are the RFPs on the solar and the wind and the battery storage, which are the types of resources that are consistent with that. So this budget contemplates and is absolutely consistent with kind of the previous direction, kind of agnostic with what's going on. But that's what we can control. To the extent we can't control something, then things may shift. But Elena, do you have anything else you want to add? Okay.
One point that Corey made that is important is obviously, the city owns CPS, but we do not interfere in operations. However, we do understand the ways in which we can help ourselves as a city, and largely in the way of property tax, right? And so we know that when CPS buys and sells a lot of property, right, constantly does that to meet operations. We do potentially, though, I think, have an opportunity to ensure that we are looking at those to make sure that we're not disproportionately paying higher for something as a result of where that property is in the city, right? We know a piece of property right downtown, the property value on that or trajectory of that, potential for that, quite high, right, versus maybe another place. So it's a balance when we look at those potential purchases, when we look at, certainly what does CPS need to do their work, how can we also at the same time ensure we are best protecting property tax value for our community? As we know, there's just not a lot of other ways in which we can generate that. So protecting potential property tax is really important. Okay. Everyone signed up to speak? Okay. Councilwoman Aldrate Gavito. Unless, Maria, you had something you'd like to say? No?
No, Mayor.
Okay, go ahead, Councilwoman.
Thank you. Thanks so much, Corey, for this presentation. One of the things I did want to mention is that when people think of city services, they think of CPS services and vice versa. And what I mean by that is that if someone sees a tree hitting a power line, they don't care who is trimming that tree to not hit the power line, whether it's CPS or City of San Antonio. We're very much one and the same in residents' eyes. And so I do think it does, that really relies on a strong partnership between the city and CPS. And, it goes without saying, but we're all part of the same team when it means caring for our residents. And I would say that because we're part of the same team, that means we have extra high standards. Rudy, I know you're a phenomenal leader and you have a great leadership team. Obviously, I know that you all are led by Francine with the board, and you're leading a great board as well. So there is some inherent trust because of great people leaders like you all and anybody we interact with, from the customer outreach, customer service team, they're all phenomenal. And so thank you so much, whether it's you all attending Coffees with Councilwoman, whether it's you all helping us with a specific customer issue, we definitely appreciate the partnership. So I know one of the things that we in District 7 have talked and worked with you all on is the large number of power outages from broken tree branches, specifically on the northwest side of District 7. And so we know that reliability is extremely important, and that we also know that an investment in this infrastructure is extremely important. So it's smart of us to continue to invest wisely in this. Also, too, thank you for continuing to invest in security. We know security breaches seem to be more frequent and sophisticated, so we have to stay ahead of the game here. I applaud y'all's efforts on the cost reduction strategies in slide 7. I did have a quick question. Has the reduction in non-emergency overtime, has that had an impact on service delivery?
I don't think so. From what I understand, no, the intent was it was non-emergency, so I don't believe there's been significant impact.
Okay. We just obviously want to make sure, again, CPS customer service is the same as city's customer service, so we just want to make sure that we're taking care of our residents in unison. On slide 8, I did have a quick question. One of the expense drivers was gas leak surveying and repairs. Is that one of the major expense drivers, or what goes into that?
No, it's not. We're always diligent about doing surveys. We're always diligent about doing gas locates. 866 is call before you dig. So those are non-questioned work when we do that. So that's it was just an example to be relatable.
Okay, got it. Sounds good. And obviously, we know that some of the rate increases coming up with CPS and SAWS and others, it's really going to put our residents in a bind. But what we can do is make sure that we are all doing our due diligence to make sure that our partners in CPS and in SAWS, have a good plan, have a good process for taking care of our residents, and can offer more to our residents than they're doing today. So this all looks good to me. Thank you so much. Thanks.
Thank you, ma'am.
Councilwoman Villagran.
Thank you. Thank you, Corey, for the initial presentation. I think we're just at the beginning, and there's still some questions that I kind of have. I'm looking forward to the next conversation because I think there's a lot of potential there as we move forward, and what is potentially out there for energy sources and revenues. We need to take a look at this in a holistic approach as we look at rates and rate restructuring and how we weatherize the homes, especially in the poorer sides of town, in the south side. Again, I will continue to say that this is all good to know, but if they can't get into a program where they can affordably weatherize their windows, getting a new AC unit isn't going to help. If they cannot if they keep on buying energy efficient devices, but they keep on flipping a switch because they have an older grid, that's not going to help too. So how do we do this in concert with each other with the different programs that we have? So I look forward to getting some of that information. The other thing I look forward to, and part of this is because I'm going out into the community and piloting, I'm going to start with my seniors, on going online and checking out these websites. And I will give you all the feedback, because I do want all of our residents, but our older adults, to be able to go online, take care of the bill, look at their energy usage. And that way that they can set up an appointment, come into the field office and talk about why is it so high first thing. So we're going to take a look at your website and what information they can garner regarding their bill there. But part of that is having a good website and being able to pay that bill and being able to do this without having to get a checkbook. So I really want to make sure that you have the system there, so that if they want to pay or if they want to get on a payment plan with CPS, that is there as we look at that. And I think that's where we look at incentivizing those that are energy savers and if it's a household of 4 but they're not using as much energy as they're supposed to, let's find out why, because they're a good model for that. If it's a household of 2 senior citizens and their energy bill is way up high, where are they wasting that energy? So I think that there's going to be a lot of conversations to have, and I appreciate all the efforts y'all put in, but I think this is the beginning of a long conversation, so that after the summer we can really sit and talk about what rate restructuring looks like and what it looks like for which of our residents and things like that as we move forward. So thank you for the presentation. Keep up. I'm not going to tell y'all to keep buying more power plants, but keep our energy on the priority. I think y'all are really good at what y'all do for San Antonio, but also for the state of Texas as a whole. Thank you.
Thank you, ma'am. Appreciate it.
Councilwoman Mesa Gonzalez. Councilman White.
Thanks, Mayor. I'll be brief. Corey, thanks for the presentation. I do want to say that I think over the past 4 or 5 years, the turnaround at CPS and the new forward-looking direction is paying dividends. And as we talk about rate increases moving forward, I got to say, and I've said it before, if you look at what's been presented to this council this year, potential CPS rate hike, potential SAWS rate hike, we've talked about property tax increase. There's been word of a potential telecom tax, related to VIA. This is entirely too much money that we're asking the citizens of San Antonio to take out of their pockets. And I know, knowing this council, that nobody is going to want to take a vote in the affirmative on any of those unless we were to see real data and real evidence that money is being spent appropriately, and that there's a real need for the increased revenue going forward. And with that said, again, I think that CPS, from what I've seen in the last 5 years, has certainly taken great strides in that regard, and I love the forward-looking nature of what you guys have been doing. With that said, I really only have one question, and it relates to AI. Any exploratory measures you guys are taking or have put in place at CPS to maybe make the organization more efficient?
You want me to take that? Yeah. Okay.
Rudy's going to say they put in ChatGPT. What is Councilman White going to ask at this meeting?
Well, in typical utility fashion, we're going at it in a measured manner, but there are all kinds of efficiencies to speak directly to your question on the other side of the upgrades that we're making, which we've been talking about for 4 years. We're about in the middle of that process, and it's going really well. And a lot of the cases that we've been building will lead us to, people, the people we have today are going to be doing different jobs in the future because of the tools that are coming along, with AI and just an upgraded computer system. I mean, our customers are going to experience, their interactions with us differently. So I think there are some really, really interesting use cases, Councilman, to answer your question, that are on our list of things that we're working on that will be enabled by the technology we're making investments in. And once we get to that point and start implementing them, we'll be coming back with a different list of what cost savings measures have come from the $300 million investment we've been making in our technology. So, I'm really excited about what's to come. And we're already doing some really cool things. We used to, just one example, we used to, send a tree trim crew out, and they would start at one part of the neighborhood and they would trim the whole, they would go the whole line, right? And some would need trimming and some wouldn't need trimming. Now we can pinpoint exactly, no, we're going to go to this house, we're going to trim that tree, and so you have a more efficient use of your resources because we're using drones, we're using, LiDAR, we're using all kinds of technology that has been, come about through the advent of AI. So there are a lot of ways that we're using them today, but there are going to be a ton more opportunities once we get our computer systems upgraded.
Okay. Well, I've got some more for you when it comes to data centers, but I guess we'll save that to the next part of the conversation because I am very interested in making sure that we can support these data centers and that we have the generators and the capacity and the equipment to make sure that we can do that, because I'm not sure that we've been able to over the past year or so. So, but I'll save that for the second part of today's B session. Thanks, Mayor.
Councilwoman Mesa Gonzalez.
Thank you, Mayor. Thank you for the presentation. Just a couple of clarifying questions. I appreciate slide 4, just really a reminder to all of us in this process of these guardrails that are in place, right? Whether it's CPS or SAWS or the city, those are all important for us to remember that we have to make sure that we do maintain a strong credit rating and that higher borrowing capacity, right? So I appreciate starting there. On slide 5, I think 5 and 6, so how much of the capital and operation and maintenance spending is directed towards aging power plants versus new generation? Do you have an idea of that?
The maintenance on the fleet we have that's non-nuclear is about $100 million, and about maybe 30-40% of that is from the new assets we purchased. And so, I think the investment we've been making is strong, and I think it's in line with the forecasts we anticipated when we were making those acquisitions. So I'm very pleased with the investment that we're doing for those.
But do you have any?
I'll follow up with the exact detail on you
Okay.
in that, yes.
Yeah, if you could, that would be helpful. And then back to slide 4 really quickly, that difference between the cash on hand and the 200 days of liquidity, is that the 1.4 and the 1.5 in the parentheses, or what
Yes,
is
ma'am.
that?
That's correct.
So the 1.4 is the,
The cash on hand, and
Okay.
then, yes.
okay. And let's see. Slide 7, on the operational efficiency, do you have any idea of, right, on the, is there any idea of the measurable cost savings that is expected from this?
In addition.
On the operational efficiency, the 40% reduction?
Oh, yes.
Well-
It's in the millions, several millions. I can follow up with you, but it was very notable.
Okay.
So we'll get you that.
Okay, thank you. Just a couple of questions on slide 8. On the growth, the 28,000 new electric and 5,000 new gas customers, can you kind of expand on what modeling was done to support this level of growth?
I mean, it's very extensive, and I think we can go into maybe more detail offline, but we have a whole team within Elena's area that looks at all kinds of economic, demographic trends all across the United States and locally that really influence what we forecast. So it's not just a trend that we look at. There's a lot of complicated analysis. We leverage some third parties as well to help with that forecast.
Okay, perfect. And then on the last point there on the planned maintenance for aging fleet, is that extending the life of that existing fleet, or is it kind of setting them up on a path to retire?
For all of our fleet has kind of an expected useful life, and so that's really just the maintenance to hit that useful life. So we haven't made any changes in decisions from, when we anticipate something to close, as an example.
Okay. Okay, those are all my questions for now. I think to Councilwoman Villagrán's point, this is just the beginning, so look forward to future conversations. I know we have a town hall set up in District 8 on March 17th, I believe, in the morning, so reminder to District 8 residents, we will be coming there soon. Thank you.
Thank you, ma'am.
Councilman McKee Rodriguez.
Thank you, Mayor, and thank you for the presentation. Can we go to slide 7 real quick? For the non-emergency overtime, what does that 40% reduction estimate to in dollars?
I think as I mentioned earlier, it's several $1 million, and I'll take that as an action item to get back to both you and the councilwoman.
Got you. Sorry, I missed that when it was asked.
No worries.
And is that a new reduction that you guys decided this year, or is that something that has been?
It was something this year that we looked at. We're looking at our processes, looking at our engagement with our customers, and where we could, leverage the good relationships we have and find savings. So it was a great effort that was done this year.
Okay, so several million there. I see 8.75 million saved in fleet strategy, about 1.7 million in technology and process automation, and then revenue and market strategies that are anticipated to. So I read the revenue and market strategy as things that are happening that are anticipated to yield a return on investment, not necessarily a operational efficiency that you're taking on in the new year. Am I accurate or inaccurate?
They are more revenue side benefits. So as an example, I may not have an efficiency on the expense side, but the wholesale revenue is an offset, to the expense that our local customers don't have to pay for. The commodity savings, as an example, on that fuel portion of your bill, that's $30 million now over the next 5 years that our customers don't have to pay, but they're getting the same product they would have anyways. So it's not, like we're out in the field doing our work becoming efficient, but this is just optimizing the financial markets and the wholesale markets in a way to defray costs from our local customers, if that helps.
Okay, I guess I'm just, because I know a big thing that I know Councilman White had asked for, I know I had asked for, was what can be done to reduce a rate increase by as much as possible and minimize whatever that was going to be. And I see here things that have been, that have been in the works for multiple years that are creating a more efficient organization. But I think the real goal was to say, hey, before we put this budget together and before we make this rate increase request of City Council and of our constituents, what is the absolute most we can do to ensure that that increase is minimal?
Everything on this page works to that effort, so we can revisit that. But that was the intent of this page.
Got you. Last rate increase, it was said that in order to implement a tiered rate structure similar to SAWS, that technology was going to be needed, and that technology would be acquired through the money that was going to be achieved through the previous rate increase. What is the status of that?
That's part of our ERP project, which is still a couple of years out from completion. That was a 5 to 6 year project, so we're in the middle of that. And I think we'll be ready to have that conversation, on the back half of the summer when we finish our cost of service study that we need to do, and can give an update on the status of our implementation. But we're still a couple of years away from finishing out that project that you're speaking about.
It just seems like a very long, that's interesting to me, and I know you had probably said it would take a while, but 4, 5, 6, 7 years, it's kind of, I don't know, it seems outrageous to me that any technology would take that long to create a system that is comparable to something that's happening at one of our other utilities already. And so I'm challenged there.
I think we can take that as an action item to follow up, but it's very complicated. There's hundreds of systems that we're talking about. You know, we'll take that action item to make sure we give you all the detail that you require before we have any more conversations on that.
Gotcha. And then what is your backup plan in the event that, or what does the backup budget look like in the event that City Council does not approve a rate increase? Because I understand that this budget was presented to the board.
I think, I'd back up to, you know, managing volatility in every year is something we have to do just because of the nature of our revenues. So through a combination of prioritization and through a combination of internal discussions, we're kind of always ready to, you know, pivot. But I think at this point, it's premature to talk about that. I think for us, it's about getting to the other side of the summer to really see what position we are in, to better inform that conversation and to inform that prioritization.
Okay. I think when we're having conversations with constituents, and surely when you come to District 2 for a town hall, it would be great to say, hey, this is, you know, this is all the work that we've done to prevent a rate increase. This is what we need at the end of the day. If we don't get this, then this is what the cost of that is. And I think making sure that we all know that and what our constituents know is going to be important. And right now, I'm not fully bought in just yet. And so those are the questions and I think outstanding items that I have for you.
Understood. That makes sense.
Thank you. Thank you, Mayor.
Councilmember Castillo.
Thank you, Mayor. Thank you, Corey and Rudy and leadership for everything y'all do over at CPS Energy. As I shared when SAWS gave their presentation, we had a utilities town hall. Really grateful for Matthew and Elena for giving a presentation and fielding District 5 resident questions. It was a very rich discussion, and there was lots of value in having both CPS and SAWS present to talk about the generation plan, and then, of course, the rate adjustment over on the SAWS end. And what was brought up during discussion, right, was some similar along the lines of the questions of Councilman McKee Rodriguez. How can we get CPS Energy to a point where there's a similar rate structure as SAWS? And Elena did share, right, it is going to require that technology investment. But I do share concerns in terms of the timeline. I do believe there would be value in frequent updates with council in terms of where you are at in that work. And that way there's bench points that we can be following in terms of what that rate adjustment can look like, or not rate adjustment, the overall readjustment of the structure, rather. And I understand on the next presentation, we will be going into some of the weeds within CPS's rate structure. But given the breakdown on slide 8, my understanding is there are unique rates for very large users. For example, the extra large power service rate and the super large power service rate. I'd like to understand, and if possible, receive a list of how many large power users are receiving each of those service rates to just understand the overall impact and just have an understanding of how this rate structure may be impacting both CPS and the city of San Antonio. So if that's something that we could receive, I'd appreciate that. And then I really appreciate you, Corey, emphasizing on the technology component. This is something with the last CPS conversation that I wanted a greater understanding. I understand that we can't get too specific, or I believe the last time it was, you know, we don't want to discuss this publicly in terms of what type of technology we're purchasing. I would find value in an executive session with City Council to understand what is the cost per technology line item, and then also understand what is the intent of each of those items, because this presentation doesn't necessarily go into the weeds of what type of technology and for what.
Councilwoman, we can come back and give you a similar presentation that we give to our board, updating them on where we're at in our technology upgrade. I mean, I know, 4 or 5 years sounds like a lot of time. It took us a year to get the contracts in place. It's taken us a year to write the requirements for what we want the system to do. And now we're, in the process of getting to the point where we're building that out so that we'll have a release at the end of this year, we'll have a release next year, and then we'll have a release in 2028. So, because we have hundreds of systems that do the things that we need them to do, you have to phase it in so that you don't, just dump all the toys out of the toy box and, have to put them back in a way that you weren't expecting to. So we've got a presentation that we can come give in a future B session, Ben, that we'll be glad to come and y'all can dig into it, to the extent y'all are interested.
Thank you, I appreciate that, Rudy. And my next question is regarding the slide that has the reduction in non-emergency overtime. Can you help me, can you remind me again how y'all got to that point?
So let me I'm going to give you an example. Our leaders have been trying to find ways to reduce, how we schedule crews in a way that doesn't impact reliability, but that allows us to save money. And I'm going to just give you one example of that. We schedule a lot of Sunday overtime. If we had to move a line, if we had to impact the customer so that their business, wasn't, impacted, we would do the work on Sunday. Well, guess what? We pay the highest overtime rates on Sunday. So we started scheduling that out a little differently so that maybe we do it, overnight on a Thursday night when, we can accommodate, when the customer can accommodate the work. So, how we actually create crews that are on standby if a storm comes in, or if, something pops up in the evening, how we structure crews in a way that allow us to reduce the amount of overtime we're paying. It's just it's a healthy way to constantly be recreating the business in a way that holds our customers harmless, but allows us to spend less money. So it's all of the above. It's every time we schedule a crew for overtime work, is that the most efficient way we can do it, or is there another way?
And then 2 follow-up questions to that. Right, the conversation of AI concerns me, especially if it's going to replace an employee, right? So none of those reductions have to do with potential AI doing work of an electrician?
No, ma'am.
Okay. And then secondly, that doesn't mean that contract labor is going to be taking up those additional hours, or?
No,
Okay.
I think that, there's work that I don't necessarily want to pay my lineman $50 an hour to go change a light bulb. We outsourced our whole street lighting program for 2 reasons. We wanted to improve the overall service to the community, public safety, and all the things that street lighting helps. But I also don't want my linemen booming up 281, in the middle of the night from a safety standpoint. That's not what I want my internal crews doing. So that's something that's primed to be outsourced. That's not going to take away from the work that our linemen, have to do anyway. So I think there are some things we can do that are more appropriate for contractors, but overall, it's not going to force a reduction. And we've got a great relationship with IBW and our NAPE, partners, and we're going to continue that.
I appreciate that.
Yeah.
One last question, and for anyone on the team, regarding some of the real estate that CPS Energy owns, right? I'm excited that one property was sold to Thad, right, near Lone Star Brewery, and to see the opportunity there. But I'm also curious, throughout the city, are there any other vacant properties that y'all have that there's potential opportunity with the City of San Antonio and the Neighborhood and Housing Services Department to construct affordable housing on some of y'all's vacant property?
So every time, we've got a strategic real estate plan that looks into the future. I have committed to investing in our workforce. And to invest in our workforce, we've got to retire 1950, 60, old crappy, service centers and build them some new stuff. And what that allows us to do is consolidate, multiple, properties into one location that more efficiently allows us, to send our crews where they need to go. So every time we buy a property, implement our real estate master plan, there are probably 2 or 3 properties we're going to sell. And we buy and sell properties, all the time. And I'm sensitive, and I respect the mayor's position on not wanting to take really good properties off the tax rolls. We try really hard to find properties that have been sitting there, for a long time, that don't have, that haven't had any other opportunities to redevelop. And, so I think there's a balance we can reach. But there are, for instance, we bought that old Malibu property off I-10. We shouldn't have bought it, quite frankly, when we did 5-6 years ago. We're in the process of selling that. And so we're constantly churning. We might buy a property thinking we might need it and then sell it because we find a better way to do it. So that happens, every year.
Yeah, and to that, I'd like to review the strategic plan, and I think there's opportunity in exploring a right of first refusal agreement with the City of San Antonio with some of those properties, because there's a lot of need and opportunity, and I think CPS would be a great partner. I understand you all have to make the decision based upon the board's recommendation, but a lot of value there. And then one last point, right, I really like the SAWS strategic plan, and I think it would be great if CPS Energy can create something similar. It walks us through for the next few years where the investment and rate adjustment would impact, right? So how many more employees would be hired to service some sewer breaks or water main breaks, and it just walks us to detail by detail in terms of where the investment would be going and also the technology that would be used to purchase. And I think, I know offline we're going to get that list of that technology or a special session or executive session rather, but I think having like the details would be, give me comfort and confidence in terms of navigating a rate adjustment.
Councilwoman, we do have a strategic plan. It's called Vision 2027. We're working through the board trying to update that right now to Vision 2030. So we always keep a 5-year plan current, and we'll be glad to come talk to you about
Yeah,
that.
and I'd love to sit and cross-reference because I have reviewed the last few years, but it's not as detailed, right? So I'd like to point out in terms of opportunity of where CPS can include additional information. Thank you, Rudy. Thank you, Mayor.
Councilman Galvan.
Thank you, Mayor, and thank you to everyone for the presentation, for the CPS leadership. Couple quick things. I don't think it's anything too different than what folks have said already, but definitely would like to see the parsing out of the infrastructure projects that are going to be highly needed to medium needed, et cetera, over the next several years. I think an overall timeline, whether it's with the rate restructure conversation, the technology needs for that, timeline for the cost of service study, timeline for the transmission projects would all be helpful to kind of have us, at least for myself, grasp a little bit more of where are we going with all of these, right? When do we need them? When is it supposed to come online? And how do we know that residents are going to be impacted? Or how do we expect them to be impacted? I'm going to echo Councilmember Castillo and Mickey Rodriguez's points. I think both we need the kind of detailed view on what happens if we don't go forward with the rate increase, what will we lose, but also what will we gain. I think in particular for any time we have conversations on any kind of rate adjustments, whether it's for utilities or tax revenue, et cetera, there should be a clear and specific material change for people. That's hopefully a positive one. And I think if residents are seeing, okay, grid reliability, that makes sense, and yet my side of town continues to face brownouts in some form, or a feeling of that, what are we doing to actually address those issues that are going to be helpful for residents to better understand, but for us to communicate what's possible with this adjustment as well. Same thing goes for any kind of weatherization programs or for tree trimming programs. I think just being able to quickly identify where we're investing that money into that materially benefits our residents, I think will be helpful in those conversations. Only one question I have two actually. One big question I had, and this is going to bleed into the next presentation, but with the cost of service study, I know we'll talk more about that in a bit, but in particular with slide 5, looking at the infrastructure reliability component, do we conclude within the customer cost of service study transmission needs or grid needs to meet growing demand, or is it primarily just how much energy that customer uses?
Not sure I fully understand the question, but a cost of service is based on the how much each customer usage profile puts on the system. So
Okay.
that's done, and we routinely do that, and we'll update that, talk to the city staff as well.
Got it.
Does that help?
It does helpful because my question was more aimed at, if we're seeing a growing customer class in some form, do we expect to then see within that cost of service study the inclusion of transmission infrastructure upgrades or grid upgrades that relate directly to that, or is it simply just kind of like the wattage?
No, sorry. All of this cost is allocated based on how much those customers put on each one of the buckets.
Okay, in total.
Yeah,
Okay,
in
got
total,
it.
sorry, yeah.
That's helpful. That's what I wanted to clarify. The other thing I know, I believe the mayor asked for this question about relating to the climate adaptation plan and the goals there. I know you said that it aligns with our generation plan, or with CPS generation plan, but where are we at with CPS meeting the currently set out climate adaptation goals?
Do you want to speak to those various ones? Yeah.
Hello, thank you for the question, Elena Ball with CPS Energy. Currently, our carbon emissions intensity for our power generation portfolio is somewhere between 800 and 900 pounds of CO2 per megawatt hour, and we have that's our current state, and we expect to have market reductions as we see generation changes from moving away from coal to renewable additions and moving toward more agile technologies like the resources that we just recently purchased in our portfolio. Corey mentioned it, but we have, over a gigawatt of RFPs out right now for wind, solar, and storage, as well as a 50 megawatt community solar RFP. So we've got all of those pieces in place. For 2030, we do expect, our objective is to reduce our carbon intensity from the benchmark year by 41%, and 2040, 71%. And so we do have plans to move us in that direction. There are a lot of changes between now and then in order to effectuate that, but we are going to arrive at substantially lower carbon intensity over the next decade and a half.
Got it. I think that was my ultimate question, right? Would you describe CPS's work getting to meet those goals? And it sounds like generally yes. And
Yes,
so,
sir.
Of course, as things shift, we'll look at that still, but thank you. That's helpful.
Yep.
Those are my questions. Thank you, Mayor.
Councilman Munguia.
Thank you, Mayor. Following up to some of the questions that were asked, when was the last time your rate structure was updated?
I'll have to get back to you on that. I know we haven't done anything significant over the last 2 rate increases.
Okay. Let's see here. And do y'all have a regular timeline on that, or is it just kind of as we go along?
This rate restructuring has come up a number of times today, and I just want to make a comment. I think inherently the way SAW's rates are structured and our rates are structured is different. From a regulatory standpoint, we have to create rates that are just and reasonable, and reflect the way a customer is using our system. And so there are ways we can create rate structures that incentivize, less usage, for instance. Now there's philosophical conversations to be had about whether you force people on those rates or whether you make them, discretionary. They can go on them if they're going to do the work that it takes, to save money. But so I think there's probably a conversation that needs to be had ahead of us about all the ways we could structure rates in the electric and gas business, and which of those we're most interested in and what the ramifications of those are. The biggest challenge with tiered rates is you're going to catch people that are at the lower income levels, that can't change the way they use power because their old inefficient house is going to use 2,000 megawatt, 2,000 kilowatt hours a month. And I am very sensitive from an equity standpoint to forcing people on to a rate that I know is gonna increase their bill. So we have to think about those, realities of policy and decide what's best for us. But I do think we can talk about different rate structures as we, get to the point where we can actually implement them in our system and decide what we want to do as a community.
Yeah, that's great, and that leads me to my next question, actually, because I'm also very sensitive to that, is when do we expect to get an in-depth presentation on STEP and the updates, and just kind of check in on where we are on that?
We actually have a year 3 report ready to go anytime the council is ready. We've had to defer it due to other topics, but we're prepared just as soon as you all are ready.
Yeah, I'll make a note to that to the ELT staff, that would be worthy in this conversation. And also, you have a community input committee. What's been their input on this proposed budget and rate increase?
Hi, I'm Kathy Garcia, also with CPS Energy. Our CIC, we actually have a member here today. Michael, thank you for being here. Is our 19-member community committee, and we provide briefings to them on a variety of topics. They have received information on our budget as well as our ongoing process for refreshing our generation plan. We do have, those meetings are open, they are recorded, they are live streamed, and we make sure to take their feedback and incorporate it into all the plans that we bring forward.
Thank you. So maybe, I haven't seen the meetings, but maybe you can just send me a summary of what their input has been.
Sure.
After you gave them this information and they got to digest it. That would be very helpful for me.
Sure, happy to do that.
Thank you. So Austin, as it's been documented, y'all have probably heard this in the past, has utilized a professional consumer advocate. And I know we have a little different situation here, but is that something that CPS and the city through Ben would entertain as a possibility?
Our citizen input committee is where we go for that type of input. I mean, if mean, I think it's a question whether or not the city is interested in getting, you know, some type of feedback, you know, independently. But, I mean, our process, you know, our CIC, our board, you know, I mean, they're citizen, you know, they
Yeah,
provide
no, that's
citizen
great.
input.
And I'm just looking at as specifically, you know, a consumer advocate, right? So I know there's great input from the CIC, and that's very important. I don't know how many of them have been, you know, done, or CPAs or have done, you know, scrutiny over large corporations such as yourself. So I'll talk to Ben about that. I think that's something I've heard a lot from some of our community members. And if there's a way for us to do that, that kind of helps the community feel a little bit better about the situation. For us, for me personally, I think it's worth it. But we'll have a conversation with Ben about that. And so when do you anticipate formally starting the rate increase conversation with the city? I know there's a whole song and dance that you do with Ben.
Councilman, I mean, council has forced us to talk about a rate increase before, you know, it's appropriate. We're not there yet. You know, as Corey mentioned, you know, there are, not every year do you see kind of a budget deficit being proposed like this, but, you know, we got a lot of investment to make. And so we try to layer it in a way that we think we can either cover it or move it to the following year or manage our budget as best we can. But when you don't come in and at least talk about our financial, you know, integrity as an organization every couple of years, whether you need a rate increase or not, then you're going to find yourselves 5 years down the road asking for double-digit rate increases or multi-year rate increases, and we're trying to avoid that. So after, you know, we get through the summer, we will see where we're at, and we'll come, you know, talk to council about whether or not we think a rate increase was necessary. We are not there yet. We have not said we're coming for a rate increase. We're showing you that we're, you know, that we got a lot of work to do and that our financials are getting a little tighter.
Right, and to be correct, the budget you're presenting does include.
Well, last year was a $40 million budget deficit as well.
Yeah.
Okay, so I mean, it's not uncommon for us to put everything on the table we think we can manage to and then manage to. We didn't come in for rate increase last year.
Yeah.
Okay, so I mean, so I hear you. You know, I wish I could tell you we're coming in for 5.5%. You know, we have put placeholders for 5.5% every other year so that we're not surprising our community that there's something in our financial plan that, you know, might trigger a rate increase.
Absolutely, yeah. And I hope you understand from our perspective, right, when this is in the news, right, and says it's assuming a rate increase, and we get residents calling us, that's why we have to ask these questions of you, right? So I understand that that's part of your process and that's what you do, but that's why so many of us are asking that question, is because our community folks are asking us about that. So I get it, maybe that wasn't covered in the news article so well, but that's why we're asking that question. Speaking of that, do you have a slide, can you provide it to us eventually, with a graph of residential and commercial rate revenues over time and documenting where you have the rate increase?
Yeah, we can do that, Councilman.
Thank you, I appreciate that. And you know, look, I had a great cafecito a couple weeks ago, and Deanne was there, and our trustee for Quadrant 1 was there. They did a fantastic job talking to residents, and I asked folks, raise your hand if you learned something new today, and everybody raised their hand. Right, a lot of folks in that meeting didn't even know that our CPS production includes plants outside of Bexar County, right? And so they were very impressed by that. You even had a couple folks really advocating for nuclear energy, which I know is something Councilman Spears lights up about every time we talk about. So that's really beneficial, right? And so I really appreciate your team being out there and asking to be there, having really good information available to residents. And of course, you know, Oscar from the crew team is always there to help out. So, I mean, we have some real crises on our hands sometimes through our office. And y'all have folks that sit down with people and really help them, not just with CPS bills, right, but other things going on. And it matters, right? And Oscar is actually from D4, from South San, and that means a lot to people there. So I just want to say y'all are doing a great job with crew and all that. So thank you very much. Appreciate it.
Councilwoman Kaur.
Thank you, Mayor. Thank you so much for this presentation, and thank you to the board leadership that's here. Dr. Mayor and I just got to sit on a panel during lunch, and we talked a lot about collaboration. And I think one of the challenges that I mentioned is, while we have the privilege, I think, of being able to own our utility companies here, it also presents a unique challenge as well, in that you all have your own board that is appointed, and we have our constituents that are often calling us, kind of like what Councilman Aldete Gavito said, about calling us about questions and asking for feedback, and what Councilmember Munguia just said, we all got those calls, right? And so I think the best that, I'm grateful for this presentation, and I think Jalen mentioned it, like, this is a good addition to our discussions, because we need to be, I think, as fluent in y'all budgets as your board members are. And I can for sure say that even sitting on this dais for 3 years, that is not the case. I know our bond rating, the city, I guess not mine, but the city of San Antonio's, I don't know your bond rating, right? And so I think it's, and maybe that's not the level of detail that everybody wants, but I feel like we need more of this kind of information. And so I know I had asked last time for what your O&M expenses are, and so I appreciated being able to see that. I didn't realize 45% of y'all's budget was people. And to Councilman Castillo's point, we want those jobs. We want people to be able to continue to stay in those jobs. So that's probably not the place that we want you cutting most from, right? So all of that to say, I think we need to continue to figure out ways to collaborate and make sure that we can get ahead of things as much as possible. So if there is a conversation happening where there's going to be a 50 million shortfall raised, that we have some kind of talking points ahead of time to say, this is why we're showing this. So on that point, Rudy just mentioned last year that you had a $40 million deficit, that budget that you passed. How did you guys cut or adjust to count for that?
Yeah, I mean, I think last year was a good example of a lot of things that were unexpected, including the acquisition of our assets. Over the course of the year, as we progressed, there are budget mitigation or actions that we took that we were confident wouldn't materially impact service levels. But the acquisition of the assets actually increased revenues that we didn't anticipate. So you had an existing fleet that was forecasted, and then you had new assets. So a ton of variables, and then on top of that, our local base, we had warmer weather than we anticipated. So we had some additional revenues come in on that side that we hadn't forecasted. So it's constantly a balancing act every year that we go through. But going into this year, kind of same thing. So we're just kind of having that conversation.
So where did you end up last year?
We haven't done our year-end financials with our board yet, but we fell within the triangle, basically. That's the goal every year, is to stay within the triangle. So our debt to capitalization ratio is probably the only one that's notably different than planned, because we acquired the assets that we just bought 100% with debt, but still maintain that below the 70% mark, I think closer to 68 or 67%.
And what is your cash on hand? It says 150 is the goal. Is that what you guys have?
Yeah, I mean, we'll be a little bit over that. I mean, we generally land between 150, 170, give or take. But a lot of that's actually dependent on what our daily spend is, right? And the cost of natural gas, as an example, fluctuates, so our daily spend can fluctuate.
Yeah. So right now, is your goal to see whether or not we can get enough revenue this summer to cover that 50 million?
I think the goal is to get through the summer to see what exists, then. Is it 50 million? Is it more? Is it less? Is it even? And I think we just have to get to that point, as we talked about.
Okay. Okay, well, I think and I heard Dr. Mera say very clearly today too, that there's no proposed rate that is being shared today. I just think we all feel like it's gonna happen, and so we're trying to prepare ourselves for what might be coming. And to Councilmember McHugh Rodriguez's points on the decrease in costs, we love that. I think that's awesome. That's what our community's been asking for, but I know Councilman asked, and I just wanted to double down on, it'd be helpful to know what those costs actually are. How much are we saving in each of those bucket items? So I just wanted to double down on that request.
Absolutely.
And then for the tiered rate structure, this just because it's been talked about a little bit today. I understand Rudy's point. I have a very old home, and my electric bill is insane during the summers. And so I understand that challenge for our older homes and areas. How have others, well, maybe this is not the right time if you don't want to discuss it right now, but I'd like maybe if you guys do come back and there has to be a discussion that's made about a proposed change for us to look at that. And if you could share with us, because we've never had that conversation, at least I haven't been a part of a conversation where we've had that discussion, and I would be interested in at least learning. I just briefly looked at what Austin does and what their different blocks are, and I'm not quite sure how that would translate if someone's on the STEP plan. And so if we could look at some examples of what different homes, different usage looks like and how that would impact their bill, I think it would make it more real for us.
Yeah, we can take that as an action item for
Okay.
follow-up, yep.
And I also wanted to double down on the STEP request. I think your programs are great, and we'd like to see them a little bit more in how they're actually impacting our residents.
Absolutely.
Overall, I really appreciate the presentation, and I just want to thank you. You did a great job presenting today, too. I want to thank you all for your partnership, and we hope we can figure out a way to not disadvantage our most underserved communities.
Yes, ma'am.
Thanks.
Thank you.
Councilwoman Spears.
Thank you, Mayor. Councilman Munguia is right. I do love nuclear. But this is really one of my love languages. I love to talk about energy. I really want to say I'm excited to see your cost of service study in the end of the summer. I appreciate this approach toward your fiscal discipline and the infrastructure resilience and the transparency efforts here. I just really appreciate that personally. I'm excited to be on the National League of Cities National Energy and Environmental and Natural Resources Committee. So I look forward to more talks with y'all about our 2030 vision plan, because I'm hoping, we talk about federal action. There is an executive order out from the president on deploying advanced nuclear reactor technologies for national security, and I'd love to see that incorporated into our Vision 2030 plan and beyond. I think we are uniquely situated and have opportunities here no one else has. And I really appreciate that about SAWS and CPS and everything in our military city USA. Those components make us ripe for that. So that being said, I have some questions. On slide 4, to Councilwoman Core and Councilwoman Meza Gonzalez's notes here, our debt, we're at 70%, below 70%. How do you see that scaling down over the next 10 years?
Downward. So broadly speaking, our goal when we talked to the community back in '22 and built our generation plan, and then subsequently talked to our rating agencies, which by the way, we're AA- stable, so for the credit rating. So we talked about a plan. So we're going to at least have a decade of heavy investment, and through that conversation, we would flex our balance sheet up to the 70%, level out for a number of years, and then bring it back down to the closer to the 60% range. I would forecast that the effort to start happening in the mid-2030s, right? I mean, we're 2026 right now. I think we're going to take that long with the heavy investment and then keep tracking it down. And I think some of the key components that we've talked about with them, just for your context, is the fact that we did establish that generation plan with the community input was very well received by the rating agencies, because it was a demonstration of a public conversation, a demonstration of input being taken, and then we've been executing it since then, with our acquisitions, all the RFPs that Elena mentioned. So I think it's very helpful. So the fact that we are sticking to that plan, and my perspective is the arrival at 70% isn't a surprise, right? It's expected. But we got to show the discipline to stick to it and bring that down as we get through this period.
Okay. So tacking on to that, then, I guess it goes hand in hand. I wondered how comfortable you were with the 50 days of borrowing power. But it sounds like we have a plan to maybe, is there a way to, in the short term, increase that?
I'm sorry, which number?
Protection? I'm sorry, on access to cash and credit. So you said, I think.
You mean the 150 days?
Yeah, we have 150, and with the credit, went to 200, right?
Yes, ma'am.
So will we have a short-term plan to increase that 50-day buffer?
You mean the liquidity number above 200? Not deliberately, but that number can actually, that's a floor. We finished last year plus 200, and that's a function of how much unused commercial paper we have, and that depends on our refunding schedule. So we can actually range anywhere between 200 and 350 days, depending on kind of where we are in the year. But I'm very comfortable with 200 being our floor that we target, knowing that we have kind of that rotation of commercial paper.
Okay, that's good. All right, then slide 5. You mentioned on customer growth, it's a $290 million. Of that, 329 goes to new customers. Where does the other 39 go?
It goes to It goes to a lot of other work that is around like civic improvements, civic upgrades when we move our equipment. And I'll have to get you further detail, actually.
Okay.
Yeah. It's also new streetlights, things like that, that you expect to accompany, new
okay.
divisions and things like that.
Okay. I saw your asterisk at the bottom. Can you help me understand the contribution in aid of construction?
Oh, yeah. That's actually a great story. So while this number is 1.7 billion, I believe it says 118 million of that is funded through construction or contribution and construction of aid. So an example of this would be, any non-standard, unique stuff that a developer for a residential community, as an example, needs to put in. They contribute upfront that cash. So it's really an offset to the expense side that the broader customer base is not paying for. And that is something that, not often talked about, but we did want to note that because while it is 1.7, there's 118 million coming in through those types of contributions.
Through developers
Typically, yeah.
fronting the cost on their development.
Yeah, it's because that's an annual
Do
number
they
we
love
expect.
that? I bet they don't love that.
It's part of, I mean, I don't know if they love it. I won't speak for them. But
Okay.
it's necessary, and we have, we've been doing that for years, and there's tariffs for that.
Okay. Off-system sales. I was glad to see a third of that new investment in those new plants was from off-system sales.
Yeah.
We repaid the investment there, a
Absolutely.
third already?
The Corpus Christi and Laredo plants were about a third. The ones we just bought, we earned about 30 million on it, but we anticipate, 100+ millions from that going forward, so significant.
So I see that as hedging our bets, right? We're hedging so we can sell off-system sales. Is our transmission investment then will help us to do more off-system sales? Is that the whole?
No, I think the broader business case for the asset purchase was it is significantly less to purchase assets that still have a long useful life. So check there. And it was for, the second part of that is, it was for growth that we anticipate having. So we're going to grow into that, and that is significant to the story. The real benefit is, let's say we grow into that in 3 to 5 years, we're getting this benefit right now today through the wholesale market, which is, I think, kind of underpins why this is such a good transaction for the community, because you're able to kind of monetize the asset in the near term, but then you need them for here, for San Antonio as we grow. So these are assets we will use mostly for our local growth over the next 25+ years.
Okay. On the outages, are we prepared, let's say we have another Uri storm, are we prepared, do we have enough storage capacity, or I guess we're going to be doing a lot of off-system sales? Can we make money like Austin and Corpus did now, or should something like that happen again?
I think I'd broadly say, we're well-positioned from Winter Storm Uri, not only through the investments we've made, over the last 5 years, the investments in storage, the investments to, all of our equipment. And to the extent, there are wholesale opportunities, and our assets are running, we'll be there for it.
Okay. I heard you say that we were investing more in wind and solar, but it was my understanding that market was saturated. Is that not the case? Or, and that's why we're moving toward gas?
My comment would be that we're investing according to the plan. So the amount of wind and solar and battery storage that we talked about, is in that generation plan. So I don't think we're over-investing. I don't know if you want to speak to the market in terms of its saturation.
Relative to market saturation of available resources, if you look in at the ERCOT queue for interconnection for generation resources, the top 2 buckets of resources are actually solar and battery storage. And that's been the case for a while. They're low-cost resources, albeit intermittent, but they also can be brought to market fairly quickly. The battery technologies are continuing to evolve, and we're seeing rapid adoption of batteries. And so we have gotten very robust responses from providers. And I will say for some of the RFPs, we're looking both at new resources as well as at existing resources.
Okay. And then I guess this one may be for Corey. Have our off-system sales revenues matched our projections from years past? Are we exceeding that?
Yeah, this past year, as Rudy mentioned, the forecast without the acquisition was actually under planned.
Okay.
But with the acquisition, there's an extra
We
30 million.
did it.
Yeah.
Okay.
And the previous 2 years were notably over plan, which was a net benefit for all of us.
That's wonderful.
Yeah.
Okay. And then can you tell me about our accounts receivable? Do you have that number? I mean, how are we compared to last year? It's kind of an indicator to me about the positioning of our residents.
Yep.
And how they're doing. And what is our collection rate?
Yeah, so Deanna Hardwick's team does a great job, and I'll speak at a high level, but generally the trend has been positive. We've been chipping away at it for the last handful of years. It's actually a positive story that we tell our rating agencies, because one thing they look at is not just the outstanding balance, but are you working it down? And the second point is, oh, okay. So we have, since last month, we had a 9% reduction, so we're now at 106 million of past due accounts from a peak of over 200 million. So it's been significant. I think one of the coolest things that Deanna's team has been able to do is ensure that we're putting folks on plans that they can meet, which means we have a very high stick-to-it rate, which is excellent. And so that stat that we share, again, the rating agencies look to that, and I think that's an impressive one that speaks to kind of the work we've been doing to be thoughtful of our community and make sure they can keep paying what they can.
I think, I know you may not have it today, but I'd like to see the mix of that with commercial and residential who's past due, because I've gotten a couple of apartment complexes that have been reached out about, they've said are overdue by significant amounts. So I'd kind of like to see that number, but thanks for all you're doing, and yay, energy. Thank you.
Thank you, man. Appreciate it.
Councilwoman Aldrate Gavito.
Thank you. I had failed to mention on slide 6, I do think you all are being strategic in the forecasted capital, which I know that y'all have worked on in partnership with City Council. But to me, it's important to highlight, because people may not connect the dots on how you all being strategic here helps lower customer bills in the future. So just wanted to highlight and call that out, and thank y'all for y'all's work there. That's all.
Thank you, ma'am.
Thank you.
Thanks, Corey and team,
Thank you.
for coming today, answering the questions. Frankly, not what anybody wouldn't expect out of the norm, right? When the owners of the resource have questions about how the resource is being utilized, right? So certainly not. I would push back on the characterization of forcing the conversation, but rather just making the conversation is happening at a tempo and at a level of fidelity that this body would expect, frankly. So appreciate that. Let me also just make sure, when I moved to this approach versus the Municipal Utilities Committee approach, it was really to ensure that the full body is more conversant in these strategic advantages, which in fact CPS and SAWS are. So I'm thankful for the very thoughtful questions here today. As we can, I think frankly, when you just look at how quickly the CPS budget has grown over the last 5 years, that is in fact to meet the demand and to be strategic, as been alluded to here. So all the more reason, I think, for this body to be able to very quickly answer the questions in a very simple way, right, the Mrs. Martinez test, about what is going on in their community, and frankly, who is driving the cost and who is not. I know that gets into our next conversation. It also allows us, frankly, to tell the good stories about, for example, the recent acquisition, right? We got a lot more power at a cheaper rate, and it's online faster, which means we're already making money off of it. Like, we need to be able to talk about those things to our community as, frankly, wins. I think what you're hearing here as well, though, is the tension between, frankly, the very good work that CPS does to keep our rates low, and they are the most competitive, some of the most competitive in the entire state. However, when it is still too high, seemingly for too many in our community, that's the rub, right? All the more reason then for us to be able to tell the story about why we've got to make these investments, not only to keep up with growth, but also for maintenance and just overall public safety as well. I want to reiterate the ask, and for the bi-monthly update on the technology solution that has taken a little bit. Short updates at each of the bi-monthly updates would be appreciated to the body. Thank you. I want to just revisit one point, Alana, because we had a little bit of a more fulsome conversation about not only does this budget rather, help us meet our climate action adaptation goals. However, there are some modifications in the approach that are having to be made in light of some of the federal changes, right? So when we spoke, we talked about, unfortunately, a coal plant having to stay on longer, right, based on federal guidance. As well as we also talked about having to front load some certain investments, so we made those in time before some of these incentives expired. So there is an adjustment we're making. I appreciate the fact that the budget allows us to still meet our plan, but if you wanted to speak now, or if you wanted to provide it in writing, the ways in which we're having to meet those goals at a higher cost in light of federal changes, then we would very much appreciate that, because we see this not only in terms of cost, but also the other changes that are happening at the EPA, right, that are then making our revisions to the Climate Action Adaptation Plan all the more important, as well as when we think about what the revisions to the Economic Development Plan, Alex's team, what that plan looks like and how we are engaging with businesses that are potentially looking at coming to San Antonio, and the asks that we are making and should be making in light of some of the changes that we're not going to be able to account for all ourselves, but that have real significant public health and cost issues if we don't work to address them. If you wanted to speak to any more of the federal stuff, Alana, you're free to.
Thank you, Mayor. I think you characterized them very well. And to overlay the point around our renewable additions, obviously we have a number of tax incentives that are going to sunset. And so recognizing that there will be, a potential increase in the cost of renewable energy in the very near future, we made the strategic decision to go ahead and bring some of those requests for proposal into the market right now. And again, we're seeing very competitive pricing. We wanted to take advantage of that opportunity, and certainly am prepared to provide a written response on any of these topics for you all relative to kind of the federal policy perspective.
Thanks for that, Alana. And as a reminder for the group and for everybody watching, when Storm Uri happened, how much did you have to dip into the strategic reserve?
I didn't catch the entire question. For what time period were you talking about?
Storm Uri.
Oh, Storm Uri. Storm Uri was unique. I mean, the way we actually financed that was through the regulatory asset that our board approved. So we ended up paying $415 million of undisputed money. We issued debt for that, and then the cost recovery component of that on each customer's bill at the time was about $1.20-ish. It's gone down now because we have more customers. And so we were able to not touch our cash balances at the moment, and then we're able to kind of manage it through that mechanism. And this city council was actually very helpful in putting those structures in place to enable that. And then, so it was something that we then subsequently, as a strategy, made sure that we have the appropriate kind of short-term liquidity available, which, to our point about the bottom right side of that triangle around liquidity, we've strengthened those numbers, Mayor, since that time to make sure that just in case we had something there.
Thanks, Corey. Appreciate that. I think you probably heard loud and clear the interest in avoiding a rate increase as much as possible, because when we think of the $50 million over the $5 billion budget, that's 1%, right? So 1% seems, even in one's own personal budget, potentially manageable, right? So would welcome, as we get closer to that understanding, if we did want to look at tapping into the access to cash and credit, which appears to be almost $3 billion, or just eating that via the $5 billion budget, what are the ramifications of doing that? Again, obviously, given the sensitivity not only to the potential rate increase here, as well as on the SAW side, and just as we see the implementation of the One Big Beautiful Bill that is going to see cuts to Medicare, Medicaid, CHIP, and SNAP impacting our most vulnerable, we want to be able to say that we've tried to shoulder as much of this as possible. Okay. Thank you very much. Okay, we will now move on to the data center discussion. Maria, over to you.
Thank you, Mayor. So just to provide a little bit of context to this presentation, Councilmember Ray Galvan submitted a CCR calling for staff to present to City Council an overview of the scope of the city's authority to regulate data centers. So specifically, the CCR identified a number of questions that the CCR wanted us to address. Number one was how resource intensive are the data centers in San Antonio? Number two, how will the growth of data centers in San Antonio impact our natural resources? Number three, the policy tools that San Antonio has to address the growth of those data centers. So our governance committee referred the CCR to the Planning and Community Development Committee. With our utility briefings already scheduled in B sessions, we scheduled this joint briefing from CPS, SOS for data center, and also we have added our city's Development Services Department to address some of the policy tools around the growth of data centers. So the goal of today's briefing is to provide you with a comprehensive overview and briefing of the data centers to facilitate and provide background information for the City Council. So that's what we hope to do today. So this is a three-part presentation. We'll start with CPS Energy, followed by SOS, and then our city's Development Services Department. So with that, I'm going to turn it over to CPS.
Good afternoon, Mayor and Council. Again, I'm Elena Ball. I'm the Chief Strategy Officer for CPS Energy. Thank you all for the opportunity to brief you on the use of advanced computing technologies and the development that's occurring really in our world and our industry. The topic of large load and data centers have become a key matter for us as a society and a community. The rapid expansion of advanced computing has many benefits evidenced by its rapid adoption and use. At the same time, however, we do understand that there are a number of important considerations for both energy, water, and other aspects of our society. So today, our objective is fourfold. I want to make sure that we provide an overview of the large load growth that's occurring in San Antonio. I know that this briefing is about data centers, and that is the majority of the large load growth in San Antonio, but did want to highlight that we do have other large loads in the form of commercial and industrial customers that are both moving to and expanding in our service territory. We also want to share the impacts and benefits to the community of these large load customers. Fairness is critical, and we understand the importance of ensuring everyone pays their fair share and pays their fair way so that large users are not cost-shifting aspects of their interconnection and operation onto smaller customers. And then we also want to talk about new solutions that we're exploring and implementing to meet this growing demand. So first up, I know there are a lot of words on this slide, but we wanted to just touch on sort of the backdrop. We wanted to just first remind everyone that we are, the electric provider for this region. And as a result of that, we're legally obligated to serve. When customers come to our service territory and request service, we are obligated to serve. And so additionally, we are working on a number of measures alongside ERCOT and the PUC to address the demand growth that we're seeing. Just for a moment of clarity here, when we talk about large load, we use a threshold here at CPS Energy of 40 megawatts. I don't want to get too jargony with you all. A megawatt of energy is equivalent to about 250 homes. So when we think about a 40 megawatt customer, that's about the equivalent energy use of 10,000 homes. At ERCOT, because they plan for a much larger portion of the state of Texas, they actually draw the threshold at 75 megawatts. So that's kind of our obligation to serve and who these customers are. We continue to invest in our system. We're focused on making sure that we're planning for growth and that we're ensuring that we have all of the necessary resources to meet growth for the future. I do want to touch for a moment on who pays for what. Corey went through in his presentation a number of aspects of cost of service and transmission and retail. I wanted to break this down in a really simple term. When we have customers connect to our system, there are really three groups of infrastructure that electric customers are utilizing or taking advantage of. The first is sort of the state system, our transmission network. This is akin to an interstate system, and everyone in ERCOT contributes to paying for that infrastructure. And they ultimately are charged based on their use of that system. More locally, you can think about CPS Energy being kind of the local roads and infrastructure. That's where our retail rates and our cost of service come into play. So customers within our retail service territory, they pay their share of the costs associated with the system that we use to deliver retail service. And then specifically, customers pay for their driveway. So there's a amount of costs associated with connecting up to the system, and large load customers pay for their connections. So just wanted to give that backdrop, and as we talk through this, I may reference back to just that concept around what bucket of costs are we talking about. So as we think about data centers, first up, we've had data centers in our service territory for many years. And what we're seeing is an expansion of the use of advanced computing technology, and it's really in service to many industries. Healthcare organizations, financial institutions, all of us in our personal lives are utilizing, whether we know it or not, advanced computing technology, and it is driving electric demand. Industrial and technology companies, media and entertainment is probably something that touches all of us, and certainly our children. Everything from content delivery to video streaming. But there's a tremendous amount of investment and use of advanced compute technology, also in research and educational institutions. Artificial intelligence is being pointed at some of the most complex and challenging problems of our society, and this technology is being used to advance solutions, and in some cases, decades sooner than we could without it. And then, of course, being Military City USA, command control, security, and intelligence are leveraging advanced computing technology. So switching to what our demand outlook looks like here in San Antonio. I know this is a bit of a chart here to kind of digest, but let me orient you. Here in San Antonio and in CPS Energy service territory, we have currently 59 projects that are in that large load construct. So these are projects that are in excess of 40 megawatts, and they're in various stages of probability. So if you work from the bottom up, actually, the bottom of this funnel represents highly probable projects. So right now we have 335 megawatts of contracted load. These are projects that have site control, they have operations occurring, and they're utilizing power. We're in the contracting phase for about another 1,400 megawatts. And then as you move up to feasibility study and new customer requests, those projects are much more speculative. And I understand these numbers are very large, but this is, we're sort of a microcosm of what's happening in the United States and certainly in Texas. Not all of these projects are going to be built, and we are being very thoughtful, ensuring that we're planning not only for reliability of our system, but also working in conjunction with ERCOT to ensure all of the necessary steps are being taken from a planning perspective to ensure reliability. This is a graphical view of where these large load projects are. The blue dots are in those more predictable phases, and the red are more in the feasibility study. And we do have projects both inside and outside the city limits. And then if you were to zoom out around our service territory, we're seeing a lot of growth. And throughout the state, ERCOT is experiencing a significant amount of large load growth, and a considerable amount of the large load growth, approximately 70% of it, is data center support. So as we talk about what are the impacts and benefits of large load customers, and I am going to be kind of specific to the usage characteristics of these large load customers, they bring capital to help us invest and strengthen our system, but they also bring a large amount of consumption on our existing system. So as we see large customers come onto the system, and I'll talk to you about commercial and industrial use of the system and how they pay for the system, they effectively help us take our fixed costs, and a lot of the costs that we have at CPS Energy are truly fixed costs. They're the network and the systems that we need to maintain in order to deliver electricity to our customers. So as that revenue grows, as that usage grows, those fixed costs can be spread amongst more customers and more kilowatt hours, and that actually has a rate suppressive or muting factor in rates across the entire customer base. For large C&I customers, reliability is very important, right? Part of why we as a utility are sought after are our high levels of reliability. These customers are bringing additional infrastructure. They're in many cases bringing backup generation, which helps support the bulk electric system. And while I know there's going to be a lot of questions today likely about what types of fuel are customers of this nature using, many of these customers have stated corporate objectives of migrating to more and more clean energy over time. And so there'll be another place for us to be able to help with transition to cleaner energy. For small business, same kind of benefits, reliability, the rate suppressive benefits, but also these facilities represent a lot of construction jobs. I know there's a lot of discussion around what are the persisting jobs, but for the next probably decade, we're going to see a lot of construction activities in this industry, and that helps small businesses and also local partnerships. The revenue that these customers will bring not only benefit the utility customers, but they do contribute revenue that supports city services. And then generally, these customers are part of our business and economic development backdrop. Again, they support by investing in infrastructure and support the tech hub that San Antonio and this region already is. We have 21 data centers and have had 21 data centers even before, kind of the AI boom. And so this is just continued advancement of the tech hub that we already are. So I'm going to transition to the financial impact of large loads. So by the numbers, for every 100 megawatts of these large load customers that we connect to our system, they generate an approximate $29 million in non-fuel revenue annually, which translates into $8 million in city payment annually. We mentioned the customer protections and making sure that we're making sure that the costs associated with large loads aren't being passed on to other customers. We have a number of safeguards and protections that I'm going to walk you all through. Cost recovery is important. We make sure that we set up long-term agreements with these customers to get full recovery of the infrastructure investments. And then, as Corey mentioned in his presentation, we are undertaking a new cost of service study, and that is the process where we ensure there's fair allocation of our system costs across all of our customer segments. On rapid expansion, the data center segment that we have today, as I mentioned, we have about 21 customers, accounts for about $110 million of non-fuel revenue. We're forecasting over the next 6 years, by fiscal year 2031, that will grow to $185 million, and that'll result in an additional city payment of $50 million. So this is an important slide. I know it has a lot of numbers on it, but oftentimes in this conversation around large loads, there's a question about, are these loads coming to an electric service territory and ultimately the residential or small customers paying for these large loads? This is an actual snapshot of CPS Energy today for our fiscal year 2026. Of our customer count, 89% of our customers are residential. So think about this as meters, right? 89% of our customer count is residential. Our commercial customers represent about 11%. When you look at the revenue or the rates that we charge to pay the costs of the system, while the commercial customers represent 11% of our customer count, they're paying over 50% of the revenue. And so that's one aspect of understanding as we grow that commercial component, the dollars and the revenue associated with that component will actually continue to grow. And as we set costs for the whole system, can be rate suppressive and help all customers with those additional sales and consumption. So fairness is critical. As we go through rate processes, both at the state level, through the PUC for transmission, as well as rate setting in general. Rates have to be defensible. They have to be just and reasonable. They can't be preferential or prejudicial, right? We have to make sure that all of our customer classes are grouped based on their usage characteristics, and that we set rates and we set our cost of service based on how those customers use the system, not based on their industry. And so our rates have to be designed ultimately to cover the cost of service and all of our debt obligations. We are not setting rates to create additional revenue. We merely are in this to make sure that our cost of service is covered. In our most recent cost of service study, which was in fiscal year 2022, we conducted a survey working with a third-party consultant who studied all of our rates. They looked at our residential class, our small business class, and our medium and large business classes. And they calculated effectively the amount of cost that those customers create on the system and how much they're paying for those costs, and came to the conclusion that both our business and our C&I customers are effectively paying their fair share plus some, and our residential customers actually get that benefit. Now, from a rate design perspective, ideally, we try to stay between 90% and 110%, kind of in aggregate around these customer classes, just to ensure we don't get too far out of whack and everyone is effectively paying pretty close to their cost of the system. But based on our most recent cost of service study, residential customers are not subsidizing large C&I customers. Another component of fairness is not just paying what you pay for in consumption of electricity, but it's also how do we ensure that we get fair cost recovery at pre-construction, construction, and then as those customers come online. Pre-construction, we require a number of surety mechanisms, and this is effectively a way for us to require these large customers or these developers to raise a surety as we purchase long lead items, oftentimes very expensive items such as transformers, such that if something happens and the project doesn't move forward, the utility is made whole and our customers don't bear the cost associated with those long lead items. Recently, launched this year, we have started charging for engineering studies. So because of the amount of interest throughout the state and in our service territory, we were beginning to expend a lot of resources in order to help our customers study if they could reliably be connected to our system and what available capacity looks like. So beginning in 2026, we've now started charging. The studies range from $75,000 to $150,000, but that's all borne by the customer. Corey touched on this with regard to construction. This isn't just large load, but effectively all development does pay a contribution in aid of construction. And ultimately, customers that are requesting non-standard facilities, such as having a redundant circuit, many times data centers do want that redundancy for high reliability, as well as premium equipment in their substations. They're responsible for raising that capital and ensuring that they're paying for those things up front. As these customers are energized and are consuming energy, we do set forth a 10-year performance period, and we basically set that up such that if they don't meet their ramp schedules, because we're projecting the costs and the revenues that are expected to come in, if they're not meeting their ramp schedules, we have clawbacks in order, again, to return dollars back to the utility to protect customers from stranded assets and overinvestment. At the state level, there is a lot of development going on at the Public Utility Commission and ERCOT. Senate Bill 6 is an item that passed in the legislature. You all, I'm sure, have heard about it, but effectively, it's a rulemaking that is helping with a number of attributes around large loads, including how we study how costs are apportioned, backup requirements, as well as, requirements for islanding during emergency events, and in general, how ERCOT's even studying these loads and including them in their forecast. CPS Energy is actively engaged. We have team members in all of the rulemaking proceedings and are providing comments and perspectives to help shape the implementation of that legislation and actions that are happening at the state. So as we think about new solutions, the world is definitely changing. When you look at the chart that I showed earlier relative to, how much prospective load is out there, it's more than our peak use, right? And so even stating that, not all of this will show up, it's still a considerable amount of electric demand. And so across the United States, across the globe, quite honestly, there are just new ways to think about how we're managing all of the growth of all kinds, but inclusive of AI. And it's really kind of coming down to a handful of areas, right? So as we think about the interstate system I mentioned, right? The transmission system, we're going through a lot of upgrades on that highway system, from looking at building new higher voltage lines. Effectively, that's helping relieve the congestion that moves energy from one area to another, oftentimes renewable energy that's in remote areas to the load centers such as San Antonio. These larger lines are going to be effectively, higher capacity interstates that can move that power, to the load serving areas of the state. Additionally, the conductors, the wires that are riding on the transmission lines, we are looking at implementing advanced conductors, again, that can move more power. On power generation, this is where, we're really getting creative, I think, as an industry, and we're seeing a lot of legislative action around power generation. Customers are bringing their own power, right? Rather than relying on the utility, based on timelines and other things to build all of the infrastructure to serve them, customers are now bringing their own generation. And so for us, we see this beneficial in a number of ways. One, I mentioned all the growth in the state and the need to have demand flexibility. As customers can bring resources that they exercise their capital for, that they're running and operating, when the grid needs them to shift load or move out of the way, these are resources that have been invested by private capital in order to support bulk reliability. I think some other items that we're looking at, we obviously are wanting to set up structures that will support this on-site generation. And then, we ourselves are continuing to look at just growth in general and how, we continue to make sure that we're investing in reliable generation as well as transmission and distribution. And that brings us to one of the tools that we have been working with the city on since the fall of last year. I mentioned the on-site generation. This is an emerging trend in the industry. This very likely will become a requirement under Senate Bill 6. That work is underway right now. But we are working on a new service option pilot. This is effectively a pilot tariff that allows for us to study how we can work with customers in their behind the meter or their on-site generation. It does a few things. One, it helps customers with a need they're going to solve one way or another, whether it's with CPS Energy or through another mechanism. But it also, again, meets that reliability and backup requirement that we fully expect, and we know that will help exercise someone else's capital to provide grid flexibility. Any units, whether it's CPS Energy units or customer units, they're going to be required to be permitted and comply with all relevant environmental and noise regulations, both at the local, state, and federal level. And the pilot that we are working with the city staff on, it is time-bound, and it would give us an opportunity to evaluate how this process will work. Ultimately, as I mentioned, we do expect this requirement to come down through state rulemaking, and it will give us an opportunity to design a tariff that ultimately would be presented to the council, in a rate proceeding based on information, data, and real-world experience. There are some other policy tools that we're considering relative to large load. As part of the cost of service study, we are evaluating establishing a separate large load rate class. As we're working with our cost of service consultant, this is one body of work that we're going to ask their help with. I already mentioned we've initiated and have started charging fees for large load engineering studies, and we are looking at, we're going to continually be looking at additional measures, not only to manage cost recovery, but to continue to protect customers from the development activities of these large loads. We're active in the PUC rulemakings for Senate Bill 6. And as we've discussed in other conversations, the federal government is also pursuing ideas to support the growth of data centers while protecting residential customer bills and ensuring these loads are paying their fair share. So for CPS Energy, our focus is continuing to stay steadfast in our customer priorities of reliability, affordability, and cleaner energy, and ensuring as we're establishing, all of our strategies, that we're apportioning costs in a fair manner and that customers who are bringing growth are paying for the growth. We continue to focus on long-term planning. I'd love to tell you that we have it all figured out. There's not a day that goes by that I don't come in and there's, a project that's moved in or out. The nature of this forecasting is challenging, both at the state level and at the local level, but we are absolutely committed to fairness for all of our customers. We talked about it already, but we're committed to the Climate Action and Adaptation Plan goals. And again, customer protection is critical for us. We need to ensure, from a system perspective, that we maintain our long-term power reserves for our customers. We do not want to be short power reserves and create market exposure for our customers. And here locally, our focus is going to continue to be reliable power and responsible growth. So that concludes my remarks. I'd be happy to take any questions.
I think we're going to move forward to SOS, Mayor, if that's okay with you.
It's fine. We will point a personal privilege. I know Councilman White would like to do something, so go ahead.
Well, Mayor, maybe if I can suggest we do the SAWS presentation, and then they'll be through security and we can bring them in. Okay. Thank you.
Okay. Go ahead, Maria. Thank you.
Thank you, Mayor.
Good morning, Mayor, City Council members. Appreciate you inviting us here on this topic of data centers. There's a lot of people talking about data centers, and rightly so. A lot of things to discuss here. We've heard it from the President of the United States talking about it in the State of the Union. We've heard our governor talk about data centers through AI revolution, that Texas is kind of the epicenter of AI. We've heard from legislators, local mayors and council members, everything from welcoming data centers to moratoriums and everything in between. So very topical discussion, and we appreciate you bringing us in. More specifically, obviously, we have the CCR that was put forward. I think Maria talked about some of the questions that we'll go through on those. Specifically, obviously, I'm going to talk about the water perspective of it. To be clear, we see the data center, advent of data centers in San Antonio as both a risk and an opportunity. We think is a highly manageable risk, but it's something that obviously we will need to work with you and our board to make sure that we have everything in the right place. And working with the data centers as they come in, as all industries come in, we need to have that constant working relationship with them. Different types of data centers, and I'll quickly get to the water portion of it. You know that when I talk about data centers, there are the traditional ones. There are lots of those all over the place. A lot of those are using traditional air-cooled and not heavy water users, and particularly the ones in San Antonio are not using a lot of water at this point. I'll talk through that. It's really the AI generators, the AI data centers that are coming in that are going to need a lot more natural resource intensive, whether that's energy or water, and a lot of times those are inverse in proportion. So sometimes when they need a lot of energy, they need less water, or vice versa. So that's where we're going to talk a little bit about the two. When we talk about the water portion of it, the two forms of cooling are evaporative cooling and liquid cooling, more of the immersion and direct-to-chip. The evaporative cooling is the one that uses by far the most amount of water, or it can, depending on how they're using the system. That is the highest water-intensive usage of data centers. Luckily, a lot of them are going away from the evaporative cooling, which is a good thing in terms of the proliferation of data centers around Texas and particularly in our community. So the liquid uses have a lot less water, are a lot less water intensive, and so we're happy to work through those. In terms of what that means in San Antonio, obviously and really across the nation, everybody is grappling with what is the water usage going to be. We play a part in various committees, national water committees, about what is the load going to be from the water perspective. We have had both sides. We've had some data centers looking for a very low amount of water, but we have had a couple of requests for a very significant amount of water. And so luckily, I believe we've talked to them and they've reduced that load. Again, I think that's some of it is going from evaporative to a different technology. So we have seen a little bit of both, at least in the initial discussion phases. San Antonio is a little bit better than a lot of other communities at dealing, or better able to deal with some of the higher usage because of our largest in the nation direct recycle system, our Purple Pipe Network. And I'll kind of give you a little bit of a twofer here. A lot of you want to know about the expansion of our recycle system in general, even outside of the data center world. And so this will talk to that a bit. We're very proud of our recycle network. This keeps uses of water on the recycle side as opposed to the potable side. It keeps us from having to go out and develop new water resources that can become very controversial, more expensive, and that sort of thing. So our recycle water system leaves us a little bit better able to manage and handle the data center expansion that we're seeing. Very generally, our recycle water system that is Purple Pipe Network goes around the city, a large, it's about 130 miles worth of pipeline, very vaguely around the 410 corridor, obviously not directly around the 410 corridor, but we hit most all sides of town. We certainly hit both sides of town, but all four sides of town. We don't go into every district, and so some more extensions might need to be made into the future, but those will cost some money. This map shows kind of where the existing data centers are. We've got about 23 existing data centers that are buildings sort of dedicated to data centers, and those are the blue maps, the blue dots that are on the slide. And then some of we've got about 10 red squares up there that are some of the new ones that we have in the contracting phase. I'll just address the CPS has a different map than we do. The red squares really talk about the data centers that are in sort of the contracting phase, real customers as opposed to those in the feasibility side of it. And you can see most of them are trying to align themselves along the Purple Pipe Network, which is great for us. And again, it goes to that ability for us to manage the proliferation. In terms of how much they're using today, the slide's been cut off a little bit, but so we've got about 100 acre-feet. An acre-foot is 325,000 gallons of water, about 3 homes. 1 acre-foot is roughly three homes, a little bit less than that. It's missing a little piece there, but the total potable usage, right now they're using about 0.1% of the potable usage in San Antonio. So a very, very small amount being used from a potable side, and then about 1.25% on the recycle water side. So a very small usage footprint right now that data centers have in San Antonio. Of the current requests that we have, or the current people, essentially those 10 dots that I showed you before, that will increase it to about 600 acre-feet, or 0.3% of our potable water usage, and about 12% of our recycle water. So significant increases, but all, again, very, very manageable from a water perspective. Where does the water come from? I should really go back to the other slides. We have 3 water recycling centers. Those 3 wastewater plants that hopefully many of you or all of you have toured at this point, the effluent coming out of the back end of those plants after it's fully treated, there's about 158,000 acre-feet of effluent that comes, a combination of all three plants. And so what do we do with that water, and how can we better use it? About 50,000 acre-feet of that is dedicated to CPS Energy for the Browning and Calaveras Lakes to keep our lights on, which is pretty important. We also have about 50,000 acre-feet that we allocate for downstream uses to make sure that water gets all the way down to the coastal area. This one is, by the way, a great permit that we just got. Mr. Puente led it actually during his legislative days and continued on at San Antonio, at SAWS. And so we have about 50,000 acre-feet that's dedicated to downstream flows. Of the actual demands for our recycle system, we've got about 20,000 acre-feet that actual demands that came through that purple pipe network that I showed you. That leaves about just under 40,000 acre-feet, 38,500 acre-feet available of water molecules that could be taken advantage of from a recycled water perspective. That's an enormous amount of water. It's a very good amount of water. However, let me strongly caution against that number. Our recycled water network can only provide about 35,000 acre-feet today. So we're already using 20 of that now. So we've got a little over probably 20,000 acre-feet available from our existing system. If we want to take advantage of the rest of that, there will be some significant expansion of the system that we'll need to do, and we'll need to put some money into it, and so that's something into the future. Again, that was the volume of water. When you have that volume, then you have to move it around the city, and so we have to really concentrate on our hydraulic capacity and the infrastructure in place, the pumps and the pipes and the tanks that are in place. When you look at it, obviously, as you would imagine, water, generally, they're using more of it in the summer and less of it in the winter. So our hydraulic capacity, it depends on time of day, it depends on site-specific, where they're located on the pipeline. But we have about a little over 1,200 acre-feet in a month, in our highest usage month available. And that would take it to the hydraulic capacity of our line. We never want to run things at full max peak volume all the time. So that's where I come up with, we've probably got about 10,000 acre-feet available to distribute in the existing network. That will require some work on infrastructure, but not from a big expansion standpoint. Our recycle system, again, this is another view of that same map, but in different colors, and that's just to notate the east leg and west leg. So while the systems are connected, the east leg and west leg are connected, there's not full ability to move water either way, left, west, and east. And most of our customers are really along that east leg, that blue leg that you see. That's the line that is sort of high usage. We have a lot of customers on that, and we have a lot less capacity on that side of the line than we do on the other side of the line. So site-specific is very, very important. We are working, and this is a very important piece, we're working on a project that would connect the Leon Creek treatment plant, you can see there, down to the Klaus plant. That will do a whole lot in terms of maximizing our ability to move water from west to east. Again, there are some more infrastructure projects that will come over the next few years, but it'll allow us to move that water a lot better and utilize that at least 10,000 acre-feet available. When we talk about cost, our recycled water, again, you heard talked about cost of service. Our recycled water is the same way. We only charge recycled water customers these rates. Our regular customers don't get these rates. Just over the past year, we've been working really for the last few years, getting it to 100% cost of service coverage. And we've got just in 2026, it's finally covering 95% cost of service, which is good. And recycle rates, we want to keep our recycled water rates lower because we want to incentivize people going to recycle as opposed to a potable source, particularly a large demand customer. And I'm talking about data centers because that's the point, but really large demand customers, there are lots of different ones that are far even outside of the data center world. But you can see our recycle rates are anywhere from 20 to 47% of our other rates, so there's certainly some room there. The mayor specifically asked a question at the last council meeting about is recycled water safe to use from a health concern? I want to assure everybody that recycled water is absolutely safe from a cooling tower perspective, from a data center perspective. We've seen a few of the studies that are out there, and they really talk about recycled water that's been used in secondary treatment. We use a higher standard of treatment. We have tertiary treatment. It has a chlorine residual which helps, and really it's about the maintenance that the individual businesses have on their cooling towers. And this is largely with evaporative. If we're talking to the mayor, we talked a little bit about outside of the data centers, the local neighborhoods. And so they just need to make sure that there's equipment in place and that they are monitoring to ensure there's not biofilm and contaminants in bacteria causing Legionella and that sort of thing. So there are some controls that need to be put in there, but it's not about the source of water. It's not about the recycled water. It's really about the equipment and the maintenance at the businesses. Policy considerations, we wanted to lay out kind of some of the areas of policy considerations that we want to talk about. We'll bring this back, obviously, to our board and then to you to lay out some of the specifics. But to the extent possible, we want to maximize the use of recycled water, particularly with high demand customers. The more we can put them onto the recycled water system, that's good for us and good for them, good for the community. So we want to maximize the use of that. That may end up being regulatory in nature, hopefully, and as you saw on the map, most of them are locating around the recycle system. So a lot of that will just happen anyway. But we need to talk about making sure that we maximize and push the use onto recycled water. Drought rules, we're in one of the most severe droughts in history right now. We need to make sure that during that goes back to the first one, that we're using recycled water and not potable water. But there are lots of ways that we can shave off some of that, even that usage, and really that goes to the peaking usage in the summer times. And also using the better technologies and going away from the high intensive evaporative use. Redundancy and reliability is incredibly important. Businesses need to have business continuity. They need to be running constantly. Our recycle network needs to be absolutely redundant and reliable. It was not built like our potable system. It was built for irrigation and flows of sort that's not constant 100% of the time. So the reliability of the recycle is not what it is in potable, and that's a big deal for a business needing it for their business process. So we need to make sure that our system is redundant and reliable, but also that goes to some of the regulations that we'll put on the businesses to make sure that their system is redundant and reliable, and what that will look like is more storage on their facility. So they're able to have more storage in case our system goes down, they're not immediately put out of water. And then they also don't have to follow it. We don't have to have a secondary backup potable source. The bigger issue as well is the modified rate structure. Our recycled water rates, as I mentioned, are very low and on purpose. We also do not charge impact fees. We talked a little bit about our impact fees, and that's really growth paying for growth. Very important, particularly in the water side. We do not have those in place for the recycled side. And so a large expansion of the recycled system probably means that we need to look at some of our impact fees and make sure that is in place. I would say, while that sounds good, that's a challenge. To get there, you have to do an engineering plan. You have to put it in a process, an impact fee process. You're looking at 5 to 7 years out before you can even put a rate in place. The data centers are here today, and so we need to make sure that the rate process is able to capture what's happening today and also into the future. So looking at some of the peaking, again, I kind of mentioned that earlier, maybe we can shave off some of the peaking and then put in some of those contamination controls that I mentioned in the previous slide to make sure that businesses are maintaining their systems. Those are the policy areas. We'll put some more meat on those bones. Obviously, we'll talk to you, we'll talk to our board, and we'll talk to the industry about bringing specific proposals to you on that. But those are the areas that we're most concentrated on. I will also say, again, we're working with various national organizations and other entities that are putting rules in place. And so we're looking at some of those. Austin, for example, said if you're located within a certain distance of our recycle line, you must connect to the recycle line, and those sorts of things. So there are some policies around transparency of water usage and directing people towards the recycle water network that we're looking at. So that's my presentation. Again, it's an opportunity and risk. We think it's highly manageable, but these are things that we'll have to work through.
Mayor, our next presentation is our Department of Development Services to talk about policy tools for City Council around the growth of data centers.
Good afternoon, Mayor and Council. Amin Tomaz with Development Services. And just to continue the conversation about data centers, one of the questions in the CCR talked about policies and procedures, if we can have anything to control the growth of data centers. So I just want to look at the existing Unified Development Code. It does lack a standalone definition or a line item in the zoning matrix for data centers. But what we utilize today is an office data processing and management. That's the closest thing we have in the matrix, and that's what we have been using for a long time. The issue with that is it does allow data centers in a lot of zoning categories, almost everything except residential. And we did check with the big cities in town. Houston doesn't have zoning, so that's we know that. But Austin, Dallas, and Fort Worth, they all have, they don't have anything in their zoning matrix. They have it on bigger scale, so what they allow data centers to be in industrial, that's it, but they don't have a line item specifically for it. Now, El Paso is exactly like the city of San Antonio. They do have a line item in their zoning matrix in regards to data processing. So they use the similar thing we have. So if the recommendation from council is to look into the UDC, Unified Development Code, and to find other options or solutions, we have a couple of them here. Option one is to limit the applicable zones to C3 and I1 to make it more limited. And or to do that, plus have some restrictions about a buffer, about 1,000 foot from any residential property or parks or hospitals or whatever the recommendation is. So again, with that said, if council elects us to proceed with this, we can do our due diligence. We will take it and partner with the stakeholders to review that. Then we will develop a draft UDC amendment. Then we can present it to the Zoning Commission for a formal recommendation and then bring it to City Council. And that's it.
Wonderful. Thank you. Appreciate that.
Thank you.
Councilman White, go ahead. You have to stand in front of the podium because we can't see you. Thank you. Don't be shy.
Well, Mayor, first of all, let me thank you and your team for allowing me to have this point of personal privilege today. And colleagues, thank you for giving me a minute. I want to introduce you to Girl Scout Troop 5059. This is a great, great group of young ladies, and I'm proud to say that my daughter Olivia is a part of the troop. And today, by being here, they are going to receive their Inside Government badge. So it's a big day. It's a big day. I know most of all these girls. I've coached them in basketball or I've seen them around school, and this is a group of young ladies that is going to go on to do big, big things for our community. And I'm happy that you're all here today, and I hope you look around this table because what you see here is a group of people, men and women, that come from all different backgrounds and have all different kinds of beliefs, but we all work together on a daily basis to try to come up with things to make the lives of San Antonians better. And all of you going forward, it doesn't have to be in elected office, but in whatever you choose to do later in life, I hope that a part of your day-to-day doings will be to think about how you can serve the people. You're doing it right now as a part of the Girl Scouts, and I know in the future in your careers and in your extra time that hopefully you will take some time to do what you can to give back, like all of these great folks that I get to work with every day. So congratulations on getting your badge, and I'm sure they would love a few comments from our mayor.
All right, ladies. Well, thank you for joining us today. We're very proud of you. I want to see by a show of hands who is going to get the Gold Award. Who's the Gold Award? The Gold Award is the highest rank of Girl Scouts. So it's the highest one. So if that's not on your goal list, please make it on there, because we know that you can do great things. Obviously, you've got a wonderful supporter in Councilman White. As he mentioned, your commitment to improving yourself, the fact that it has started so early, I think really speaks to not only your maturity and your self-discipline, but also thank you to the parents that brought them here today, that takes them to all of their events, and frankly really highlights the importance of an organization like the Girl Scouts that prioritizes civic engagement and community service and personal development. So congratulations, ladies. I hope you make $1 million on your cookie sales. And if you have cookies, please feel free to pass them out. But thank you. Congratulations on getting the patch today, and onward to Gold Award, right? Okay, thanks, ladies.
Whoever has Samoas, I'm ready to buy some right now.
Thin mints.
Thank you, Mayor.
Okay. Thank you for all of the presentations. This is a topic that is getting a lot of attention, and again, related to the previous topic, helping our community understand the difference between what is happening and maybe what they hear is potentially contributing to rising costs, right? And data center topic is one that is kind of part of that all across the country. So I also appreciate Councilman Galvan being thoughtful in his leadership to make sure that this is a topic that is at the forefront. So thanks, Councilman Galvan. And really appreciate, the intent of this was make sure that we level set across the council, but also certainly across our two strategic advantages, which are these two utilities. I want a couple of points of clarification, though, before we move forward. Elena, on slide 7, slide 5, rather. Oh, they did bring cookies. Oh. Yeah, thank you. Oh, they're not going to make them to you? Yeah. Okay. Yeah, understood. So on this slide, Elena, when we just do quick math here, right, and I understand not all these things are going to come to fruition, but if 1 megawatt is 250 homes, if all of these things came to fruition, this is 7 million homes.
We do not believe all of these projects will come to fruition. Quite honestly, there's a number of activities going on at ERCOT, including proposed requirements around, site control and some collateral mechanisms that we see are really sorting out perspectives from true projects. And in fact, if you note this slide, this was as of January 12th. Since January 12th, we've actually seen the number reduce, and we have gotten direct information from customers that it is tied to some of the proposed changes at the state level. So very large number, but there are, and one of the other items ERCOT is including is effectively clarity on if you've got a project, are you proposing your project in multiple jurisdictions or multiple queues? And so it's really, I think, going to help rationalize the demand. But certainly large numbers. I would say, just for clarification, The 1,700 megawatts, más o menos, that are in the agreement phase, those are going to take 5 to 7 years to bring on board, right? So we have a tremendous amount of work, both at the customer site, and we ourselves are doing upgrades to our transmission system just for reliability that are going to be necessary in order to bring that load on.
Well, and thank you, because even just that's 440,000 homes still. So certainly appreciate the longer time frame to be able to account for that. When we talk about the pilot that was described, this is one that I am particularly interested in and really speaks to ensure that the left hand SAWS knows what the right hand is doing, CPS. Because in effect, right, just real plain speak, if this pilot would be approved, this would allow these data centers to come into our community at a rate faster than anticipated, because what this essentially does is serve, if I'm correct, and if I'm mischaracterizing, you'll correct me, I know you will. Because what this does is serve as a bridge until the CPS infrastructure can catch up, right? And so, i.e., they would be in our community sooner than CPS infrastructure can support, right? And so if we're doing that, I think it's really important we understand, it's great that CPS can support, but I know for a fact SAWS, as of right now, only has enough recycled water to support 2 more hyperscalers, and that's it, right? So understand there's, energy solutions there, but they're not bringing their own water, right? They're not bringing their own water. And Donovan, if you want to come up, one of the things that Donovan mentioned yesterday at our SAWS board meeting, when I raised this exact point, is that these folks, the data centers, if need be, they may be, if we're not able to provide the water, they may be able to go directly to Edwards Aquifer, thus competing with us. Is that correct, Donovan?
That's largely correct, and let me talk a little bit about, you mentioned the 2 customers that could eat up a lot of our source. We've talked a little bit about that. That's really if you have enormous customers. So the ones I talked about wanting to use 5 million gallons a day, that is an enormous amount, which is about 5,400 acre feet. I talked about 10,000 acre feet available, and that's where you get to the math of you get 2 customers and they've eaten up most of that recycled water. That's an important number to know. Luckily, I don't think we're having those sorts of numbers anymore. I think that entity that we were talking to has reduced their numbers significantly. The other entity that had talked to us has largely gone away, and so I think those numbers are coming down. So I think we are able to sustain a lot more than 2 entities, again, assuming that they're using the numbers that we're seeing with the other side. But specifically to the Edwards Aquifer question, that answer is yes. And so what we've had in other communities, I talked about some of the policy aspects. Some of the other communities are requiring that data centers bring their own water to the table. And deed it over to the municipality. And that can be helpful for certain communities, but for us, what that means is that they're going to go out into the market and purchase Edwards Aquifer water rights, and they would bring that to us and give that to us, which might help from that perspective, from that one entity. But we are also out looking for Edwards water, and that's part of our water management plan, Councilwoman, you mentioned earlier. And so by creating that kind of incentive, we're incentivizing the data centers to go out and compete with us for water resources in the Edwards Aquifer, use the Edwards more, drive up the prices substantially. So I think that's the point that you made yesterday, Mayor.
Very important point, yes. And to your point, I mean, while it might not be the 2 hyperscalers today, right? There's nothing preventing 2 other hyperscalers from coming in right behind them, and we're in the exact same point, right? Because adding to capacity for recycled water, that's, I guess, give us a sense here of the runway needed to support that.
Yeah, and that really goes to the point of we need to incentivize more ability to the recycled water system, but going away from evaporative cooling. And again, I think the industry is largely going away from that. So I think organically some of that is happening on its own, but there might be regulatory policies that are needed to incentivize using lower amounts and better technology.
The information on slide 5 that Elena presented, are these the same planning considerations that you are taking into account?
I don't know the numbers here, how they relate to the water side. I do know we talked about the maps and the entities on the maps, and largely the ones that are in those final stages of contracting, they have come to us. And so I think we are planning to the same numbers as they are.
Well, I would want us to make sure that we confirm that for sure, because again, this is a significant list, and we want to make sure that there's as small of a delta from the time that CPS knows something to the time SAWS knows something, so that, again, we're all planning for the same thing, given the strain this is on the infrastructure. Actually, Elena, are you able to? Oh yeah, please go ahead.
I was going to offer perspective relative to the NSO and the new service offering tariff, and I wanted to echo the in-process and contracted resources, right? So that represents about 11 projects, and when you overlay both CPS and SAWS map, they're identical. Because of the speculative nature of some of these projects really looking for power, they're working, submitting requests and looking at where they might be able to have capacity, and they haven't actually, gotten to a place where they've actually got, a detailed design that would inform the water side. But our teams do share information, and in fact, we've just not too long ago rolled out an NDA allowing data sharing between the entities, and so I did want to add that. For the new service offering, this wouldn't be necessarily bringing new customers. It would be enabling a tariff for behind-the-meter generation, which is coming with these customers, but it would allow us to study that component. It certainly does, help the utility get informed around what a tariff would look like, because we do expect under Senate Bill 7 requirements for behind-the-meter generation, backup generation for these customers. So that's why we've been working with the city staff on this tariff. It is a pilot, time-bound for 2 years and limited to no more than 15 customers. And right now, we do have customers who are in that contracted phase that are interested in this pilot tariff.
Donovan, do you have the water needed to support that pilot?
I believe so from what we've discussed, yes. And I think really the entity wouldn't be able to get started if they can't bring the water to the table. And so the entities, I'm assuming that are talking to CPS Energy, are the ones that are in that final stage of discussing with us. And so we've already gone through that. They would need to build the physical structure. We don't have a similar pilot where we can bring a water plant on site and them using it. That just doesn't happen. So they would have to build out a thing to us. And that's where the recycled water comes in handy.
Rudy, you've shared some of the reality, if you will, with, if the pilot isn't approved, the companies may be able to, there's a workaround, right? One of those that I heard, I wanted to, if you'd confirm or deny that, but if it is one of those options really the companies trucking in
Yes, ma'am.
liquid natural gas?
They do it all over the state where they can't get power infrastructure. They'll truck in compressed natural gas to a modular unit, and they'll run it that way. And they're willing to take. Now, you can't scale that, right? So you're not going to get 100 megawatts out of that, but you're going to get some amount of capacity that at least let you, do your construction and get the project going. And then there are other. There are other risks that I'll generally allude to. When there's a perception where we can't or are unwilling to do our jobs, I think that's where you find conversations start to happen at the Railroad Commission or the Public Utility Commission or the legislature saying, hey, CPS Energy's not doing their job down here. We need some legislative relief, and we try to balance all that to make sure that we're protecting our service area.
Certainly, thanks for clarifying that, because I think when at least when I heard that, that is the least attractive option, obviously. And we're obviously though partners in helping to communicate both at the federal level and at the state level the ledge agenda that shows how it's not just CPS not wanting to provide the service, but it's rather CPS's owners, the city, potentially wanting to do an environmental study to understand the impacts of these various approaches. So, again, there's a partnership there that we can communicate to folks some of our real concerns, not only in the ability for water to support this, but also for us to understand the real infrastructure and potential public health consequences of some of these approaches. Okay. Donovan mentioned my concern about the public health risks potentially, right, associated with recycled water. Again, some other communities are much further along in their data center journey. I was talking with the mayor of Phoenix, and in fact, in communities around a data center. Again, this is a couple of years ago, right? But they do have higher rates of COPD, right? And so I think it speaks to the really important, the importance rather of really strong controls in place to ensure that not the type of water, as you mentioned, but rather the process and the systems in place to ensure that it's as safe as possible. We've also heard, obviously, given my national security background, very supportive of making sure that JBSA has all that they need. But when we look at potential data centers on JBSA, would either CPS or SAWS, can you highlight for this group, illuminate for this group, some of the unique considerations that those pose?
And how the military in general can expand. We have a very good relationship with JBSA and the military about ways of expanding within San Antonio. And so I can't get into I don't have any specifics for you in terms of whether they are looking to add a data center that we would support. But that infrastructure is there, it's available, and so we'd be happy to get into those discussions.
A couple other comments here. This is an area where the community really wants and certainly deserves transparency. And so, we here changed our approach to when it is acceptable for the city staff to sign NDAs, right? Especially when it comes in the economic development piece. And so, minimizing your use of NDAs around these particular projects, if not outright saying we're not going to do that. And if that's something that our own city attorney needs to help with, or maybe, Andy, you can weigh in now, but this is an area where, again, we want to make sure we've got as much transparency and are not needlessly signing NDAs on this topic if it's not needed.
And Mayor, I'll just say from San Antonio, from SAW's perspective, we really don't use NDAs for these.
Okay.
Certainly, CPS Energy, we've exposed and will continue to share the data that's in front of us. We want everyone to know what projects or prospective loads are coming. And again, this is predominantly around data centers, but it's other things. So this is a very competitive landscape, and so we are careful to protect customer information, to protect information that we are sharing and working with these customers, given the highly competitive nature. We can't be in a position, we have to be careful to not be in a position whereby we would be demonstrating, exposing a competitive advantage of some of these large companies, or in any way be perceived as giving, any kind of, inconsistent or perceived preferential information or treatment to customers. So we do sign NDAs, and as I mentioned, we've recently worked with customers to allow for sharing of information at their discretion between us, SAWS, and the City of San Antonio.
My last point on this, I appreciated the tour of the facility where those folks work hard during an emergency, right, to make sure that the the way in which folks are impacted during an emergency is as equitable and the time minimized is minimized as to the greatest extent possible. One of the things, Elena, that you mentioned, though, that is on the horizon that we need to be cognizant of, certainly I'll be cognizant of it as we're shaping the ledge agenda for 27, but also even in the upcoming SA to DC trip, which is the ways in which certain data centers are looking for that exemption. Which then, in a time, what that means practically, right? Well, let me not put words in your mouth. Why don't you explain it better? Because it is significant if those folks are, kind of taken off as not somebody that needs to be impacted during those emergencies.
Yes, and so when you look at large loads, and in particular, these data centers that we're talking about, are all going to likely be, in play under Senate Bill 6. In times of emergency alert activities during, times of grid distress in ERCOT, right now proposals under Senate Bill 6 are that those loads would be directed to come off of the grid, to shift that load off, and thereby would likely need to have behind-the-meter generation. There's also provisions under Senate Bill 6 relative to demand response and having that backup generation. So we believe those requirements are coming, and again, that's why we're proposing finding ways to effectuate that. But absolutely, the expectation under Senate Bill 6 is that during times of an emergency alert, where we get into very tight grid conditions, these large loads will have to move out of the way to protect bulk system reliability for all of 90% of us Texans that live and work in ERCOT.
Thank you, Elena. Councilman White.
Thanks, Mayor, and thank you to Councilman Galvan for putting forth this CCR and for kind of letting me jump the line here so I can go talk to the Girl Scouts. We need to figure out how we're going to get more of these data centers here, and we've got to do it responsibly. Do we need to have some more large user policies in place? Probably. Do we need to make sure that we have some of these buffers set up between the data centers and neighborhoods? Yes, because we've of course got to protect our neighborhoods, but the jobs and revenue that these data centers can bring to our city just cannot be ignored. If you look around the country, including from the data centers that are here, there's $80,000 a year plus jobs for some of these technicians that work at the data centers, $100,000 and up for engineers, not to mention all of the construction jobs that are generated when these things are built. In terms of revenue, obviously, the property taxes from the land involved is a significant source of revenue for cities where these data centers reside. But you've also got the personal property taxes that come in as well on the equipment used by the data centers. And from what I understand, the equipment at these data centers get changed out every 3 to 5 years. So it's a significant amount of revenue that can be gained there. And then, of course, for us here in San Antonio, our portion of the CPS Energy revenue makes up a large part of our general fund budget. And so having data centers here is going to be a benefit to us for everything else that we want to do here in the city. It seems to me, too, from everything I read, that the companies that are putting these data centers all across the country will foot the bill to be here, right? They are willing to pay much of the cost of the infrastructure cost to get established. I'll also say, Maria, I don't know if there's a more property tax significant investment, right? Dense investment that we can make in our city than one of these data centers. And then, Rudy, I guess my one question is, if we grow the generation base here, we can potentially drive down the energy costs for some of our consumers. Do you think that's fair?
I think it's fair from a couple of perspectives. Number one, obviously that's a lot of load. I mean, that's a lot of generation that could be required over time. And, whether you build it, you buy it, on the market, we go out and buy more plants. I mean, that will drive, we're kind of at capacity, with where we're at right now with our debt service, to doing more. But I think, as they come in, there's revenue associated with that. So yes, as we need to procure more power, that helps the whole system. But the power that they're now will be required to bring to the table is the same type of generation that SAWS is having to put on. So there's market opportunities for those smaller generators by working together that can also offset the need for us to go buy some at the end of the day. So I think there's a lot of opportunity. We just got to put all the pieces together.
And do you see us being in a position, in the next few years to be able to support moving more data centers here?
If we all stay on the same page on what we're trying to accomplish, Councilman, yes.
Okay, all right. And in terms of water, really my last question is, this closed loop cooling system that I think some of the newer technology in the newer data centers are uses at least offset some of the concern about the water usage from some of these facilities. Is that right?
Absolutely helps, yes. As we talked about, the evaporative cooling, using it inefficiently, it's a major load on the system. So the more we can use those kinds of ways, those kinds of technologies, that will reduce the water load greatly.
Yeah, okay. Well, I got a couple more questions on these that maybe I can ask of you guys offline. But I do think this is, we need to embrace these data centers. They can do a lot for, I think, revenue moving into the city, jobs and things like that. So I'm for doing all we can to facilitate it. Thanks, Mayor.
Councilman Galvan.
Thank you, Mayor, and thank you to everybody who presented today overall, but particularly on this topic. I know we've had multiple conversations over the past month alone, frankly, in multiple different settings, whether it was SAWS, CPS, or DSD regarding this topic. Very appreciative, of course, also of all the industry who have reached out since the filing of the CCR, talking a bit more about the local impact that data centers are having in District 6 and across the city. Appreciate Councilmember Villagrán as well for hosting a kind of roundtable event last week. It was really helpful at Brooks regarding this topic. And of course, very thankful to all the residents in District 6 who have shared their input on this topic, who have shared their personal feedback in living nearby the highest concentration of data centers in our city. Some of the concerns, some of the benefits, some of the questions that they've all had are shaped this CCR and have shaped, I think, a lot of this conversation today. In particular, I want to shout out a couple of the HOAs nearby. Some of the major data centers, Stonegate Hill and West River Valley, have a lot of historical knowledge on just kind of talking about what it was like when they were first coming into our community and what it's been like since. And so, all that said, I'm very appreciative of this conversation and grateful we get to have it here at a B session. One of the big things, just to get straight to it, for the DSD presentation, I want to be clear just on my support for different things. I'm supportive of the recommendations, but I do think we should focus it on I-1 zoning versus C3 zoning. I think, frankly, this all should be considered within industrial, similar to that of other cities that we've seen across the country do this. I think even exploration of a specific youth authorization is still worthwhile to evaluate within this. The 1,000-foot buffer is fine with me. I'm just more eager to see what that evaluation looks like. But those are, I think, my two red lines that I would like to focus on. Otherwise, within the DSD task force, which I'm eager to see, what the competition will look like. I think also exploring the definition of a data center. I know Amin, you mentioned a bit about that in particular, so I think that'd be helpful to have come out of this. Looking at setback requirements, I think just comprehensive review on, even landscape buffers, screening requirements, building and fire code updates, lighting requirements. Again, nothing prescriptive, at least from my end, on what those should come with, but I think those should be evaluated because I think there's a lot of opportunity to address neighbor concerns that I've heard in my community that I think could happen as we see an expansion of this industry be addressed more proactively, get some ground rules for all that out of the way sooner than later, of course, in coordination with all the stakeholders needed for that conversation. I think in particular also even parking requirements would be a good conversation there too. So I'll leave that one where that is. A couple questions. I forgot who mentioned, there was a mention on CPS's timeline on slide 5 of this presentation. What was the timeline for some of those? contracted projects?
Thank you for the question. For the contracting phase and under contract, those projects are likely to be energized, and each one has a different ramp schedule in the next 5 to 7 years.
That's right, okay.
So, yes,
Thank you.
sir. And then the others obviously maybe further out.
Got it, okay. I think similar to the comments I made in the previous CPS presentation regarding the timeline of cost of service studies, the timeline of, oh man, I forgot the other part I asked for. Ooh. The transmission project and even tech needs for the rate restructures, I think that's helpful to keep in mind, just as we're looking at what things do we need to make sure that are going in line with all this work as we look at this industry growing here in our city. I think that'd be helpful to just kind of better understand overall what our local energy needs are. I think within do we have a timeline for the cost of service study at the moment?
We have begun the work. It's probably going to be about the next 3 months. Is that fair?
Okay, got it. And then
concluded.
be released in the next 3 months, or still some?
Yes,
Okay.
we always make our cost of service studies public, and we'll absolutely
Got
share
it.
it with this body and others.
Thank you, that's helpful. Let's see, there's one of the slides here that talked about the medium to, I think it was slide 12. Are we able to parse out the medium and large business cost of service study, or cost of service at this moment?
We do have all of that information from 2022.
Okay, if we could share that, and then I don't know if it's already within the 2026 study, if that could also be a pricing out of data as well.
It will be.
Okay, thank you so much. Supportive, of course, of the study fees and the clawbacks and the kind of work related on that front overall. I really appreciate the work that's already been done on the back end, and grateful for the conversations you've had with my team about that. On the new service option pilot, I know we talked a little bit about the potential for, or the overall conversation around on-site generation and what kind of fuel will be used there. Do we have any examples of data centers across the country utilizing more, and maybe this is a conversation that will come through with the larger task force, that are using more renewable energy with that backup generation?
We do see in various markets these large loads coming with different types of generation. And, certainly having resources that are lower carbon are certainly in alignment with some of their corporate objectives. I would say, certainly with renewables, having long duration storage is going to be necessary to support some of the requirements under our state rules. And that's why you're seeing more of these data centers coming with firm fuel supply,
Right.
As opposed to intermittent resources, because when they do need to move, they have to get off the grid, and that's where the firm fuel comes from.
Got it. And I think understanding that will be helpful, just even where we're at with battery storage technology, about what is possible, right? Not only from maybe just an energy use provider, but also from the data centers themselves, right? What is possible within their size, their capabilities, so that way the community can be on the same page about that, and so that we're still, as an entire city, still trying to meet those climate goals that we're looking at too. That's a really important thing to myself, but also to members of my community. Do we have any kind of particular goals with that pilot, what a successful one would look like?
We do.
What are successful outcomes?
We do. And again, the success criteria that we've laid out in the draft NSO, we have 5 criteria. It's effectively looking at, studying the tariff, ensuring that we understand how the resources are used, ensuring that costs are fully contained within the customer, and then just looking at the effectiveness of how we've structured the tariff. So we can get you those success criteria, but we've outlined 5. And
Okay.
again, the pilot is intended for 2 years. For customers who raise their hand and say, we're interested in this, we will limit that. We're not opening it up
Right.
to, the universe.
Great, that'd be great to review, so thank you for that. One last, question for CPS was, on the NSO, on that same pilot, and particularly the tariff portion of it, will that have to come to council? I know you mentioned something about it getting some kind of approval, but is that to council or for city staff?
So we've utilized new service offering pilot tariffs in the past, and that is, work that occurs with the city staff.
Okay.
And so we have not brought those to council. Certainly, if the pilot appears to be solving, the need in a persistent manner and in a way that we've, identified the ideal structure, we would embed that in an upcoming tariff discussion and propose a tariff in collaboration with the city staff and the mayor and council.
Okay, great. I think, as we're seeing progress with it, it'd be helpful to either get public conversation about it, just given the conversation already, or public update, or even a memo from the city staff to us, that way we're able to communicate what's going on as we continue this conversation. At least that's something I would prefer. For SAWS, really quickly, I don't have too many questions. I appreciate the briefing we had. It feels like we saw each other almost every day. It was, I think, a week ago or so. And so I don't have too many questions for you, but I did want to ask, in particular, I know we talk a lot about the shifts in technology within the industry to reduce the kind of use of a lot of water within the cooling methods. Do we know how many data centers currently use evaporative cooling?
I'm sorry, say it again?
Do we know how many data centers here locally use evaporative cooling? I don't know if that's something you can share.
I don't have that exact answer, but the ones that are using evaporative cooling are very low usage right now. Again, evaporative cooling is in lots of different businesses for lots of different reasons, not just data centers.
Fair enough.
We have a lot of evaporative cooling throughout the city. But in terms of a larger data center, the ones that are out there right now are using very, very low amounts. So,
got it. Okay. I think that'd be helpful. And we can have a larger conversation on the back end, both with SAWS as well as with industry, about what that looks like to kind of show that. I think it's that same point about that corporate responsibility in that form, making sure that they're meeting their own sustainability goals and proving to the community too that that commitment is still there. I think that's something that's really crucial that I've heard from residents, where it's, okay, well, how can we require? And I say, well, I don't know if we can do that here locally, but also I think there is that commitment, at least from the entities I've talked to, about moving to that different technology, because one, it's just frankly better for their portfolios most of the time, but also helpful to make sure that it's supporting the reduction of a negative impact to the community. So I think that's something I would like to see how we can share that a bit more to the broader public.
And I would just reiterate, we did, as I mentioned earlier, we did have an entity looking for a large amount of water, which we assume is evaporative, and we do have other evaporative cooling around the state, and so while I think generally the industry is largely going towards that, evaporative cooling is still something that is used all over and something we need to pay attention to, so I appreciate that.
Got it. Thank you. Only thing I was going to say was just I also appreciate the policy recommendations you provided there. So thank you so much. Thank you, Mayor.
Councilman Mickey Rodriguez. The system is saying that you did. Okay. Councilwoman Alderete Gavito.
Thank you. Thanks to both SAWS and CPS for y'all's presentation. Obviously, there was a lot of work and thought that went into this. And, I think that it's important that we do that work proactively so that way we can make sure the path forward with data centers doesn't negatively impact the average customer. I also want to thank Councilman Galvan for pushing this discussion forward. That said, data centers are here and more are coming. It's important that we get ahead of the potential long-term impacts sooner rather than later. Many residents are concerned about the impact on water supply and our power grid and the cost of each of those utilities, so I share those concerns. So having discussions like this and being transparent about it, I think, is helpful when we're talking about that. We also do, as Councilman White said, know that data centers can create economic opportunity and growth for our city. So we have to find that right balance that works for San Antonio. I was curious on slide 5 of CPS's presentation, Elena, like if, the mayor asked, that would potentially be 7 million households with a new customer request. When we're looking at the funds, and this is quick math, for the under contract, how many millions of dollars would the city potentially get back?
Yeah, we're estimating for each 100 megawatts that the city would have an increase in city payment of 8 million. And so you can just take that 100 and multiply it through the various bands. So we do expect to see increases in revenue, not only for CPS Energy, but obviously for city payment. And as I mentioned, with that pie chart, it's not only revenue, but it's revenue of that large customer class, they will naturally bear more of the cost of our system, which will reduce that system cost for residential customers.
For residents, yeah, and I can't remember what slide, but the pie chart where it talked about the resident payment and the business payment, I thought that was an interesting breakdown, because I think that is something that we need to keep in mind. I asked that question because, again, those dollars will affect our city's general fund. And so we need to think about that because, we're all wanting to spend more money on nonprofits, we're all wanting to spend money on homelessness and stuff. And so we just need to be cognizant of any unintended consequences we could have if we really start limiting this and swing the pendulum one way too far.